teaching about mediumship and how to do loving mediumship, because that's something I'm very interested in.
We'd like to do.
We'd like to, yeah.
I'd love to,
Yeah.
and we've had that request from a few places around.
Yeah.
So it would be fun to put together something just like a couple of days where people could come and we could just focus on that.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
Yeah. The problem is, oftentimes when we advertise an event and they're in one location, you end up 300 people wanting to come to every event.
Yeah.
And that, you know, we're not so sure how to sort of
we have to figure
manage
a few
it, because
things out.
sometimes some events don't really lend themselves open to 300 people being there.
Yeah, like a mediumship
Yeah.
learning is a bit. I mean, you could do it, but it would be a lot, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So would then, if we want to have an interest in, per se, mediumship, we can just tell you we have an interest, and then whenever you decide, well, you could feel who could come.
Well, that's also a bit difficult because it means Mary managing hundreds and hundreds of people in different locations, which takes a long time. You guys don't realise that a lot of you were very high maintenance as well. So it's particularly in the US, we've found very high maintenance. And
everyone thinks, oh, it's just my little inquiry. You know, I'll just write, could you just
you
change me, or could
like,
you just do this, or would there be any space, or can you,
in the
do you
US
know
alone,
about
there's
this, or
350 people asking.
what's the weather like? And it's sort of like, well, usually when I'm getting those emails, we're doing another event somewhere else, and you know, you're sort of trying to just. Like, I don't mind, it's been a great experience, but
in the future, I've said to Mary, I don't want her answering any emails out from anybody. And we need to find a booking system where she doesn't have to do any emails aside from just send out a group thing saying...
Yeah, which is technically what it should have been this time.
That's right, yeah. Because that just takes huge amounts of time in answering everybody individually. And we don't have anybody back home to do that either. And of course they don't know what we're doing either when we're travelling. Right. So we also have meetings with them once every, we intended to have one every 2 weeks, but we've had
two, I think. 2
total so far on the trip. We have one this week with the people back home, just in terms of... With the directors of God's Way. So we have to keep up with that as well. Yeah. And also, while we're travelling, I have to do all of our accounts as well. So in Australia we have to do a return every 3 months on our accounts, so I have to do that while we're travelling as well. And so it's pretty busy when we're travelling, and so we've just got to slow it down a bit. Is what we want to do for next time. Yeah.
And then we can be better for you guys as well, you know, because we get tired, or you know, we're not
get tired, get run down, don't get to feel any emotion, and then of course you get, you know. Some of the groups we've had, like half the group come sick, you know, to the group and things like that. So you end up catching what they have, you know.
Anyway, thank you for that. I think we'll come back.
So was there a double flight for any of you, like 2 flights you had to do? 2.
Yeah. Where did you come by, lady?
So you came from Austin. And then where did you go
to? Cleveland, or you can go to DFW, or you can go, there's options, but there's no direct.
No direct. So there was 2 or 3 of you, no direct.
But I had to come from out of country.
Of course,
But everywhere else direct, hey?
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. It's only leaving for some reason I have to do 2, coming because of the times. I didn't want to leave 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah. But Robin, you're both directions, you're going to do 2?
From Texas.
Coming.
On my phone, I'm going to stop and see my daughter, so I found a DFW. But it's fine.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, DFW, Dallas is often a central hub, isn't it, for Americans?
Yes, it's
so
big.
almost everything goes back to Dallas.
But I'm not sure it has a direct to Brisbane anymore.
They stopped it.
Oh,
it used to, and then I just looked it up last week, and it was showing again. So, so maybe they've restarted it. I don't know. Because when we planned this trip, they didn't have it.
No. Normally we'd either go back through LA or through Dallas.
That's a nice place.
So we are thinking, like, well, do we do the whole thing in Dallas then, or in LA? But LA is like
Yeah.
Very expensive.
Very expensive.
And expensive
Very
for you guys if you don't live there, you've got to get there and stay there and all of that. And that's the other question, like, is this was it easy enough to find accommodation and reasonable enough?
There seems to be plenty of accommodation.
Airbnb.
And very good pricing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
compared
what
to other places.
Other places, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so we were thinking, and also our long-term goals, the only two places we're looking for in the States where it might turn out to have centres would be either Texas or here. Well, when I say here, Tennessee border here, probably.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so it could be sort of the other side of the mountains, like the Appalachians, or this side. Yeah. Yeah, so you know, this is why we've visited Texas many times, so we know Texas pretty well. We want to visit here a few times so we get to know the place a bit better. So, and later on, when we've got the people, we'll sort of know where we want to go then, is the idea as well. Yeah, so was there another question we want to ask about all of that?
No, I think just...
What's your school holiday periods? Are
Does
you all
that
the same on
affect-
all states, or?
Is it, you know, summer?
It depends on the snow.
Yeah. So your summer, which is what? Summer holidays are what? July?
June.
June?
July.
And a little bit into July. Oh, okay, so long.
Yes.
Yeah, they go through to August, does it?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
So if you're here in September, people have kids in school.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
okay.
probably...
Okay. Yeah, so it'll probably be September, I think. Or just the end of August, maybe September.
And that would be a little earlier in our hurricane season. Right now, you're in the peak of our
Of the
hurricane season.
Yeah, yeah. Mind you, I've seen hurricanes come through here.
Yeah, right.
At strange times.
Yes,
right?
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
It's just averages.
Yeah, as I was saying to Hampton, it's just the ocean, particularly your Gulf Ocean, is quite hot, and
Yeah.
that's what's generating all the energy, isn't it? So,
Mary, because I'm leaving early, I would be interested in next weekend. I just got word my caretaker can watch my mom, so.
All right. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
good.
Do you want to send me an email at event at Part2?
Yeah,
All right, lovely. So did you want to, any more admin?
I don't think so. Is there any questions you want to ask about those practical matters, about future events or anything? Because the other option we also have is the whole SIN group, like a SIN group.
Yeah, that's the other option. We could do a week.
Task force.
Yeah, like an assistance group for like 5 days. Well, it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. It may be 5 days presentation or something.
Yeah. That's it. That's an investment of your time.
Yeah.
Is that sarcasm, John?
I must warn you though, what we found in Australia is by about the 3rd or 4th day, most people were just so saturated that they stopped sort of participating, and
Right.
they just got more and more overwhelmed.
Think of it like if you do your homework until next year, you might be like...
Yes.
And you're open to feeling, like every night you probably have to go and have a good ball,
That's
Exactly.
right.
and then come back the next day and it's
That's
like,
right.
okay, give me some more.
Yeah.
So do you think you do it like in Australia where you have a day off?
Yes.
In between
So in Australia we do 2 days, 1 day off, 2 days, 1 day off, 2 days. So it's like a 8-day.
I'm not sure whether we would do that this time. We might make it shorter, like a 4-day thing only or something, and just do 2 days of day after 2 days or something like that.
Yeah, which is probably
Because we found by the last 2 days everyone was so saturated that there really wasn't a lot of participation. Yeah.
Everyone's
With
just
the
like,
purpose
make it end, make it end.
We're now enduring.
I was looking at your 2016, the laws of responsibility and laws.
Yeah.
That would also be wonderful if we could have, I know we've talked about it here, but I
Yeah,
find that very helpful.
yeah.
Because that's all
Understanding the
the...
laws. and the
high-
That was
Yeah.
another group that just went over the
Everyone.
top of everybody's
Really,
everywhere,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
Patty, you were there, weren't you? You
I
enjoyed it a
was,
lot.
it's
Yeah.
so important.
Yeah.
It's so, yeah, a repeat of that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so important.
But there's a whole series, we intended to do 8 groups in a series, 9 actually now, in a series of the assistance group. And we've only ended up doing 4.
Yeah.
And the 4th one we haven't really got good recordings of either. So we also want to break the SIN group into 2 groups actually. So one about sort of
Well,
becoming
3, I think,
aware
we
of
decided,
that
didn't
sort of
we?
thing.
We,
Yeah.
we have 2 in the series, and then
2,
we were
3,
going to
yeah.
put a 3rd one in the middle,
In the
because we
middle.
realised one is understanding sin and its causes, and the second one was removing sin and its causes, and then we realised we just needed to do some stuff in the middle.
About confronting.
Yeah, confronting
About
sin and its causes, yeah.
Yeah.
The battle.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the subject matters are next time we come around.
But sin is a good topic. It's a good topic.
Yeah.
It's where, it's where you get real about all this stuff and the practicalities of it in your day-to-day life and what the real pains are in your life.
Yeah. So that's our plan. So you probably will see us August, September-ish.
Yes.
All going well.
Next year, all going well.
Keep an eye on those websites that we gave you yesterday, so
Yeah.
event.divinetruth and mary.divinetruth.com, and we'll keep you updated with how it's looking.
But we are thinking we'll sort of do a really big event, like in the sense of like 200 or 300 people type event, and then do smaller things after that.
Yeah.
Because that way we get to talk to a whole group of people first,
Yeah.
and then, that means that everybody hears that same information at the same time. And then when we talk about other things, we can always refer back to those things.
Would it be a little bit longer? If it's such a big event, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days?
No, probably 2. And the main reason why we're thinking 2 is because it also makes it easier for those who are working and everything to still come if they want to come. We'll make it probably there Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
And we might sort of start a bit earlier on the second day and finish a bit earlier so people can get actually a flight home in that Sunday evening.
Although, can we say, we don't really recommend just like scooting off, because often you stir it up and it's good to give yourself a bit of time.
If you can.
Just to settle with things.
Yeah. But also a big event like that takes us a day to set up anyway. So we have to hire the venue for 3 days usually just to set up. And we'll probably need a staged hall of some kind, because when you've got 300 people, none of them can see you when we're just flat on the ground. So a few things to work out, and we'll have to have a look at some venues and work all those things out. We are looking, we're thinking next week we'll look at some motel venues, but if any of you might know locally of any like amphitheatre type venues where you've got raised seats with a stage sort of low at the bottom, like a lecture hall for a university or something that might be available during
That would have to be around here.
September, I suppose. September, everyone's back at uni, are they? Yeah. So it may not be available.
But not on the weekend.
Yeah, not on the weekend.
Not on weekend, maybe.
I'm sure the university would be happy to make money by renting it.
Yeah.
There's I don't know if they were on Patty's information that she had, but there were 2 places that I found that had that amphitheater type thing.
We just started to go through
We started going
the
through
list
the list
this
last
morning.
night. This morning.
Looking them up, so we're not through the list yet.
Would you guys be open to like Atlanta if I found something? I do know a guy who owns a center stage.
How easy is it to access?
The land is pretty easy to access, but
It's got a major airport.
Atlanta has a big hub.
It's a big job,
I think we would prefer around here somewhere just because it's our longer term goal, and because Mary and I it's been our longer term goal for quite some time, like a solid 12 years or more, but we haven't actually visited the place very often, or at all. So, whereas with Dallas, Texas, we have visited all sorts of locations there. And so we've got a good idea of what's available there. But here we don't really have a good idea of what's available in the future in terms of if you wanted to set up a centre. So we're thinking here for the next year or two maybe, at least, and then we'll sort out. It's difficult because when we do around the world, we're visiting 4 continents, and also there's a growing interest in Brazil, so South America as well, and we've got to be careful that we don't overextend ourselves in terms of what we're doing with the travelling versus also the benefit to the people involved. So, yeah. But at this stage, we're thinking probably like Portugal, UK, Canada here, 4 weeks apiece or something like that.
It'll probably evolve. So we'll just.
So we're still weighing up all the options. Yeah. And we don't want to travel much more than 4 major times. Like here, we have to do double flights together and double flights out as well, similar to what you guys who have to do. That's what we have to do to get home, and also to get here from Canada. That there's no direct to Halifax, so you have to go via Philly or via Washington or something. So it's sort of double flights here and double flights out. But for us, if we only have to do that once in a 4-week period, that's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. Means we're not writing off 2 days every week.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what we thought we'd do now. Notice my blank screen.
Must be a spirit talk.
No, what we thought we'd do now is just open things up to your individual questions on any subject you wish to ask. Sort of like, and I'll tell you whether I want to answer that question or not. And if I don't want to, it doesn't mean that your question was bad or not valid. It just, under some circumstances, like I've answered them so many before, I might refer you to something else, or
and we want to answer questions that we think will benefit everybody, so your individual questions can often benefit others. And also it'd be good to answer questions that are more sincere, if we can say that, rather than just about universal truth. The application of truth to yourself is probably where we want to focus this afternoon.
Right, so that's what we thought we'd do. So away we go. All right, now can we start? Yes. What was your name again?
Tara.
Tara, that's right.
So my question's about free will.
Yep.
Those okay. Going back to where we started with Debbie, was asking questions about the soul.
Yeah.
And very specific questions. And during that conversation, the messages that, so I had the expectation that if I do all the work we're talking about, that eventually I'll get to my real self, and there's gonna be this like joy and freedom and happiness, like this good stuff is gonna happen.
Yeah.
But, well, okay, so this is what I'm finding is, and my question is, this might just be me, or, I'll get to that, but it's like, there's like not much there, like it hasn't been exercised.
Oh, I see.
And so I think that's some of the first guys crying a lot, there's shame I'm feeling, just being seen and all that, but I think there's this deeper pain I'm still working my way into. There's like, I'm doing all this work, I'm really dedicated all day long, years, and I'm getting there, and it's like, where is it? Like it's so
aside from your pain, like you had to go through a fair bit of pain.
Yes,
and so you felt a fair bit of pain, but where's the pleasure?
Or where's the real you?
Yeah, and there's even pain that like the real me is like, it's like a very undeveloped,
correct,
unexplored, unexpressed.
So it's that's painful. full.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was kind of in a shock, and that's causing this paralysis I was crying
Yeah,
about.
in terms of not wanting to do much more work.
Yeah, or just like shock.
Yeah,
Like, oh my gosh, that's me?
yeah,
And then my other question, so I want to check in, like, am I in the right ballpark
Yeah.
for me?
yeah. Can we not ask the other question?
Okay,
Let's
okay,
focus on that
yes.
one first.
Okay.
Yep. And if we get to your other question, we will. But you're dead right. If you think about it, for the majority of us, what's happened in our childhoods is that we've learnt at a very, very young age to not be ourselves. So what you learnt is that you were taught from a very young age that if you were yourself, certain people didn't like you being yourself. So there were times when you were yourself, and then that got shut down, whether it got shut down or violently attacked even sometimes. And you end up finishing up believing that you've got to become the person your mother and father wanted you to be. And this is very prevalent in a Western society, by the way, too. In other societies, sometimes not so prevalent because they have to do mundane things every day just to survive, and so they're not that overly invested in their children becoming mirror images of themselves, you know. But in Western societies, there's a lot of emphasis on helping the child become the person the parent imagines the child should be, which is usually what the parent believes it missed out on, is what the child needs to have, and so forth. And so there's a lot of expectation placed upon the child, which the child learns at a very early age that it needs to take on board. And so you end up changing, or not even knowing who you are in the end. Your personality and your nature, so your personality, which God created, and your nature, which God created, are sort of suppressed under the weight of what your mother and father and your society and your religion and all the other parts of society that cause you to, go in a certain developmental phase through your life. You get pushed into this path that frequently has nothing to do with you understanding your personality and nature at all, but just becoming a person that everyone else expects you to be. Some of you liked it, in the sense that some of you even have come to the stage where I think that's the right thing to do, almost.
Or I think that is me.
And some of you didn't like it, so you rebelled. Right? So some of you liked it and you went along with it without any rebellion, really. And then others of you almost rebelled and did the opposite thing on purpose. But again, it's not you, it's just you rebelling. So it's still not discovering the personality and the nature of you. Who is you? Who are you? And when I say you, I'm talking about you and the other half of you, because that's where the personality resides. So here we are, we're the soul, and it has a personality and nature that God designed on purpose. And a part of the soul's journey is to discover itself, discover who it is, what it loves, what it's passionate about, what lights it up, I often sort of liken it to like, what makes you enthusiastic and joyful, that kind of thing. You've got to discover these things about yourself. What is your real nature and your real personality? Now, unfortunately, what happens is that the upbringing process, which is very flawed on earth as we know, suppresses this personality and nature. And so what happens really if you think of it from a logical perspective, the personality and nature of this soul, you might be 50, but this soul understands itself to the development of a 2-year-old. Or even less than that. Does that make sense? So it's like you're in this big body and you've lived a whole life which has been largely dictated to you by others or by society or cultural expectation, right? And usually a combination of both things. And by your religion and all the other parts of your upbringing, whether you had one or didn't have one. Even if you're brought up an atheist, that's a religion of its own, really. And you're brought up in these sort of constructions, you could say, of the society you've entered, and as a result, your personality and nature is, you could say, it is not developed. Barely at all. And the more pressure you had to conform, the less developed it became.
Yeah.
Right? So, and usually highly developed societies have the most pressure to conform. And because that's how they maintain the stability of the society. Yep. So here we have, in an adult form, you know, maybe live 50 years or 60 years or 70 years or whatever, but we have a 2-year-old soul. Right? In the sense of its personality and nature. But we have, if we're 50 years of sin. So 50-year-old sin.
Or facade, you could say.
Or facade, you could say. Now, you can see straight away, that's a tough situation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because the sin which drove you, who a lot of what you are now, the facade, you could say, the facade is driven by the sin. The facade being the person you imagine you have to be versus the person you actually are. The facade is the person you felt like you had to become, right? And it's interesting with the facade too, because you felt like you had to become a certain person with different kinds of people too. So it's like when you're a teenager, you start trying to fit in with your teenage friends. But when you become an adult, you try to fit in with the peers as an adult. And then you've also got to maintain a certain type of facade with mum and dad. And you've got to maintain a certain type of facade at work. And a certain type of facade. And sometimes these facades, the people you turn yourself into, are not even related to each other hardly. And by the way, women are better at it than men too, generally. There's a lot of pressure socially for women to be better at it than men. Right? Men usually are allowed to do more things in contact with what they feel like doing.
They're allowed to disagree more.
They're allowed to disagree more. Women generally, and these are generalities by the way, women generally are not allowed to disagree as much, they're not allowed to get angry, they're not allowed to, they have to fit a certain role, which is taught from childhood, what that role is. And so women learn to actually break away facades for different situations much more easily than men do, generally. Right? So it's very difficult. Because we've got this 2-year-old soul who knows itself to the extent of a 2-year-old, and as you know, when you think back to when you were 2, did you know much about yourself? Hardly anything, right? And this is what we know about that much of our personality and nature, right? Which is really sad, right? Because that's what God designed us to be. And also that by becoming that, you become the happiest you can be as well. So happiness and joy is connected with your personality and nature. The things that are going to light you up in your life are all to do with your personality and nature. Meeting your soulmate is all to do with your personality and nature. The soulmate's the other half of you because they have the same personality and nature. So you can see, if I'm 2-year-old in development in an adult 50-year-old body, but I've got 2-year-old development of my personality and nature, how do I recognise my soulmate? I'm like a 2-year-old with my feelings, you know, just spurting them out everywhere because I don't have any further development than that, right? So you are dead right in how difficult this is. But it's made difficult because of this problem, not because of how God designed it to be. Right? So the 2-year-old soul somehow is going to have to develop, and the 50-year-old sin is somehow going to have to be reduced. Now, can you see, if you've got 50-year-old sin, it's going to sort of swamp the 2-year-old, isn't it? in terms of the soul, the 2-year-old soul. And this is why, one reason also why it's so important to get rid of that sin, because you get rid of the sin and you start exposing your own personality and nature to yourself. That makes sense?
And in that process, it's kind of like Jesus was showing, the little child learning to walk. It's sort of like that with your personality. You have to remove enough sin that you stop judging your personality. And I think a little bit of what you're describing is that you're getting down, getting closer, but there's a bit of paralysis because there's still a judgment of who
that person may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as you work through that, then it's also like starting to explore the world in connection with your personality and nature.
Yeah.
And that is like almost that wobbly learning to walk thing, and having different experiences.
It'll feel like learning to
drawn.
walk, but learning to walk in life in almost every area.
Yeah.
That's how it'll feel.
But the joy will come in that process. But it's not just like streamers fall from the sky. It's happened,
Yeah.
Which feels like a loving process to me as well, because you're getting to have experiences that you should have had when you were 2. It feels a bit weird because now you're 50, but you're getting to explore life and to discover yourself in a very gentle, like exploratory, experiential way, rather than Shazam, here it all is. That would be a bit strange, wouldn't it? That would be almost like someone overcloaking you.
Well, actually, it would be so strange to you psychologically that you probably wouldn't bear it psychologically.
Yeah.
So that's why it needs to be a gradual process, because the majority of you actually, if you were presented with your true personality and nature as a 50-year-old without having known it before, many of you would have a major psychological meltdown with that process. And that's not what God really wants you to have. He wants you to go through a more loving and discovery process.
Exploring
process.
Kind of like growing your muscles, like getting more experiences and enjoying it more. You go from crawling to walking to running to climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So once you start getting rid of a lot of your sin, you'll get to this stage where you start realising that you don't really know who you are without your sin. Like your sin feels comfortable, and then you without it feels uncomfortable.
Yes.
And you don't really know what to do either.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You don't know, what do I like? What do I don't like? Once I got rid of my sin, it's sort of like, what do I like now? I don't know what I like now.
What should I even do now?
What should I do now? I don't know what to do now. Like, for me, I was told by my mum and dad that I had to have a trade. So eventually, I did electronics engineering. But I don't like electronics engineering. Like, when I say I don't like it, I just, there are parts of it I like. but there's a whole heap of it that I don't like, And so it helped me discover some of the things I like, but not everything I like. And then when I decided I was going to become a property developer. But the main reason why I did that was because I wanted to earn some money so that I could have some freedom. But there are certain parts of it I like I love designing things.
Yeah.
Right, so I worked out, I love that part, but actually doing the whole negotiating with the councils and the local governments and the governments and the planning commission and the blah 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 blah, I don't like any of that. It just bores me to tears. So that's not, you start working out a part of what you've done in your life. You start working out parts of your personality and nature, generally. So there's certain things that you're attracted to in your life where certain parts of your personality and nature have generally been shown to you, but that's mostly because you have a guide or a guardian who's trying to help you, through all your sin. He's trying to help you discover bits of yourself, even with all your sin, right? So, that's generally the case. So not everything needs to be thrown out with the bathwater. You know what I mean? You don't throw out the whole baby with the bathwater. So you just throw out the bathwater, but the trouble is you got 50 years of bathwater and 2 years of baby. You know what I mean? So it's like a tricky process now, isn't it? You've got to reduce this sin as much as you're able so you can recognise the person underneath, but the person underneath is undeveloped. So now you've got to start looking at going through a process where you work through, well, how do I develop now?
Yes.
But it's really tricky because you're now like classified by society as an adult.
Yeah.
But really, from an emotional perspective and personality and nature perspective, you're still a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
So now it's quite tricky because the things you could have done when you were 2, you now need to do for yourself to discover yourself. But everyone's going to look at you very strangely, of course, thinking, why are you becoming a 2-year-old? Like, didn't you like that? And didn't you do that? And weren't you like this? And I thought you were like, you loved that. And, you know, everyone around you gets a bit confused with it. And even you get a bit confused with it. So I thought I liked that, but I don't know if I do anymore, you know. And it is a tricky process to come to discover oneself. However, a necessary one. A very necessary one. The problem is that the stagnation of our childhood is that we've been manipulated to a degree, firstly by the society in which we grew up, and eventually by our own self, manipulated into denying as much of our personality and nature as we possibly can generally. And then, on top of that, piling a lot of sin on top of that. So, you know, so what is underneath is almost unrecognisable. And unless you undo that process, you're not going to come to discover yourself. And what is very helpful is as you reduce your sin, you can now have a stronger connection with God. And God can help you discover who you are by living in harmony with the principles of love, truth, humility and faith. He can lead you down a road that allows you to discover who you are. Right? When you do it without God, it's even more difficult because you've got to plan the road and walk down it in a metaphorical manner, rather than somebody else saying, no, God does know your personality and nature. Thank goodness, right? Yeah. And so He can help you discover it as you get closer to God. It's going to be a lot easier for you to discover it and accept it and to come to love it and to come to love it with passion. Like, this is me, you know, like loving that with passion, which is what God designed every one of you to do for yourselves. Yeah? But the start we've had is very bad. And you've got to let up on yourself about it. When I say that, what I mean is you've got to be consistent in dealing with your sin, but you've got to stop, you know, attacking yourself for what's happened. You know, it's happened to everyone generally in society who's ever lived here. Once sin began, which it began with the first human couple, it got established pretty rapidly after that, and almost every person who's ever passed from this earth has left the earth not knowing who they are, not knowing their personality, not knowing their nature, not knowing their good personality or nature traits that God designed, not enjoying them, not coming to love them, you know. And for almost everybody, it's taken many years, sometimes thousands, as a result of the bad start. Right? If we could do for the next generation the opposite, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yes.
Because they would be like we're seeing, like in Australia, we're seeing some 12-year-olds who have a very good idea of what their personality and nature is. And as a result, they're making choices and decisions that most 50-year-olds don't make for themselves. Right? They're doing things like determining, I know what I want to be. And so I'm going out in the world at 12, I'm getting work experience, I'm getting whatever, because this is what I want to be, I want to do that now. You know? They go to school and with passion, because they want to be what they want to be and they know how to get there.
Awesome.
Right? So they're not sort of sitting back going, why am I going to school, and this is boring, and why am I doing homework? None of that. And then on their weekends they go, well, this is my passion, so I'm organising some work experience here and some things going on there to make sure that I do my passions on the weekend. And do you know what I mean? They one of them is a manager. We use him to manage groups of people in God's way. He's 12 years old, and he manages 70-year-olds. Pretty tricky for the 70-year-olds. Because the 70-year-olds don't understand our 2-year-olds. But anyway, so it's pretty tricky for them. But very good. Sometimes he'll say, you guys have got intergender emotional issues, you need to sort them out. You go that way and you go that way. You sort them out, type of thing. And because he can feel them, because he's got some development of his personality and nature, and he can feel what's going on. And frequently, completely accurately. Yeah? So if we could do this for the next generation, by the time they're 12, they know who they are. Not by the time they're 50, not knowing, and having to undo a whole heap of sin on top of it. So, but this is where we're at. So don't get hard on yourself about where you're at. You've had a bad start, right? All of us here have had a bad start. If we had a bad start, stop getting on top of yourself about your bad start, and just deal with things consistently until the bad start starts getting reversed. Make sense? Yeah. So have some love of yourself and some kindness towards yourself, and understand, yes, it's tough realising by the time you get rid of some of this sin, you'll start realising, wow, I've just got an undeveloped soul. Like a 2-year-old. I don't understand myself. I don't understand what my real goals, passions and desires are. I don't understand my own nature. Don't get hard on yourself about it. Just go, all right, now I don't know, so how am I going to find out? I'm going to have to do some exploration, just like I would have if I was 2. I'm going to have to put myself in some situations, pretty tricky when you're 50 maybe, but you're going to have to put yourself in situations where you have some experiences and you do things. And so example of that is you can say, okay, so this month my goal is to work out whether I like music, like art, engineering, or maths, or science, or chemistry, or many of them. Or what do I like? So how do I do that? Well, I might do a month of art, a month of music, a month of science, a month of maths, a month of chemistry, a month of, plan to experience some things so you can understand yourself. Not for the purpose of being good at it. You see, many of you, when you plan to do something, you're going, I've got to be good at it. This is coming from my childhood. Dad in particular, probably pretty competitive. So I'm going to choose to do something. I've got to be good at it. So you pick up a guitar and I've got to be playing it within a month, right? It's not going to work like that. It's going to be pick up a guitar, bing, bing, bing. No, it doesn't work for me. Can I learn it? Try to learn it. See how you go. Does it connect you to anything? What's going? Experiment with yourself. But don't expect to be good at anything, because a 2-year-old isn't. The 2-year-old's not even hardly good at walking yet, right? Let alone doing all the other things, right? So because our 2-year-old soul is not developed in this area, we've got to stop expecting ourselves to be perfect when we start things, and we've got to start going, let myself learn. I know it's going to be tricky now because I've got all these oppositions to learning and all these difficulties learning, all these things that have happened that have caused me to resist certain things, learning and so forth. But let's just enter this phase of my life where I'm learning about myself. Who am I? Right? Discovering bits and pieces about who I am. What do I like? Do I like it because my sin likes it, or do I like it because I like it? What don't I like? Don't I like it because my sin doesn't like it, or is it that way because I don't like it? It doesn't sort of grab me. Which one is it? You may need to work that out. Now, God and your guides will help you do that, right? Because that's God wants you to be the person God designed you to be. So God's like very interested in you doing that. But you've got to have some level of compassion and understanding for the 2-year-old that hasn't had those opportunities. Make sense? And most of you haven't had the opportunities yet. Now, many of you now are in a position in your life where you can create some opportunities. You have a degree of comfort, you have a degree of experience, you have a degree of, life experience that makes you realise that there's certain things you like and there's certain things you don't like. But, you've not let yourself really proactively go through that experience of who am I, discover who I am, let the 2-year-old develop. And nobody's done it for you, because everyone was so busy moulding you. Nobody did it for you. So you're going to have to do it for yourself. And there's nobody on earth who can really help you do it in the sense, we can encourage you, but unless you choose to do it in your own life day to day, it's not going to happen. So that's the other thing we've got to come to terms with too. That's a part of the sadness of what's happened to us in our childhood, is to come to terms with the fact that nobody in our childhood gave us that experience to discover oneself, right? If somebody had it, you would be right now a completely different person with a completely different life mostly.
Yeah.
You would. And you have to at some point just grieve that's true. And let it go, because and now you have the opportunity to do it. You know what you know now, so now you can do it, and have compassion for yourself in that place. Make sense? Yeah. Good question, though. Is there any questions related to that question?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Katerina?
So talking about the exercise that you just said that we should do before, which I got really excited because it's something tangible that I can have.
You mean
myself.
about the sin?
Yes, the 15-minute.
The 15-minute feeling every
to feel the
day?
emotions and feel
What
am I feeling right this moment.
Yep, that's going to help the 2-year-old, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And my problem is this, which is the biggest problem you said most people have in another presentation, is about God.
Yeah.
So about me believing that God loves me believing that God is willing to help me.
Yeah, feeling that's true.
Right?
It's a big problem for most people.
It's a problem for me. I have the emotion that God needs to help me.
Yeah. Well, God should help me work out my problems.
Right.
Yeah.
That He should be helping me, and that.
But not that He loves you
But
and
not
cares
that
about
He loves me and He's going to put me through it, because I did realize God is the bad parent that I always had.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. The parent in authority.
Exactly. So He still means authority to me, and it doesn't feel loving. And even though intellectually I can say it, it just doesn't hit my heart.
Correct. Yep.
So the problem I have there is, if I don't believe in God, how can I be sure that when I sit down with my soul and try to see what I feel at that moment for those few minutes, I know I'm also heavy spirit influenced. How heavy, and I can hear voices, and then some feel good, some feel bad. Sometimes I'll choose the one or the other. How then will I shush this or discern? Oh, what am I feeling?
No, it's a good question. So let's look at it. Here's my soul, and this is your half, right? So your half of the soul is in a state where you're sort of going, well, I don't really have that deep feeling of faith in God's love at this point. Now, of course, to get faith in God's love is going to require you experimenting with your relationship with God, as well as you experimenting with your relationship with your own emotions at the same time, because we're saying that God communicates to you via your soul. Remember, your soul's brain is emotional, so it's all going to be, communication is all going to be emotional. And if I've got to disconnect to my own emotions, then obviously how am I going to have a connection to God who is trying to communicate with me via my emotions? It's not going to work, right? Right, so I need to, so one of the things I must learn to do for myself, whether God exists or not, what I must do for myself is have my own emotions. I must do that. Now, you must do that whether you want God in your life later or not. Because if you don't do that, you don't have your own emotions, you will not ever live a real life, whether that's with God or without God. You'll never have a real life. Emotions are all of your source of joy comes from emotion. So without emotion, you're going to be disconnected, right? So whether God exists or not, and whether you have faith in Him or not, the exercise of sitting down with yourself for 15 minutes a day, connecting with your emotion, still works. Because you need to learn to connect to yourself. Who is this 2-year-old soul? What is she? What does she feel? What is her nature? What is her personality? What lights her up? What makes her feel like What are other things that are causing one or the other reactions? Like what's going on inside of self? That needs to be determined, right? And that needs to be determined independent of your relationship with God. You follow? So whether you have faith in God or not, or faith in God's love or not, at the end of the day, you're going to have to, at some point, obtain some faith in your emotions. Or you could say, faith in yourself. You're going to have learn to have some connection with self, that you can connect to self. Right? So for myself, that took me nearly 7 years of work to do that. Before I could really, in this life, not in the first century obviously, it was different, but in this life, it took me nearly 7 years of quite diligent work to help me connect to who I felt myself to be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And at that stage I did it without God's help. I just focused on who am I, what lights me up, what do I enjoy, what don't I enjoy, getting rid of the sin. We're getting rid of the pain and the suffering as well. I focused on doing that because I realised the more I got rid of that, the more I could recognise myself. So I had to do that. And it took me nearly 7 years, solid 7 years. I started when I was 33. By the time I was 40, I was able to have feelings about who I was. So in between that time, that's what it took, right? And most of that time, I was celibate and alone, most of that time. So it took me a concentrated effort on sorting myself out, basically, is what it was. Now, once I had done that to that degree, I could start to feel what I felt about God, really felt about God, and what I really felt about other things. Because I'd got rid of a fair bit of sin, but also recognised what are the things that light me up and what are the things I enjoy and so forth. And I started doing the things I enjoyed, right? And I did that, started doing that more. Before then it was just work. I used to work I don't know. My average work week was 70 hours. Right? And then sometimes I would work 4 days straight without any sleep as well. Right? So in those weeks I worked a minimum of 96 hours. Right? So it was full on. And then once I got more and more connected, I stopped doing things like that. Stopped forcing myself into those kind of unloving positions. I started changing how I viewed my life. Started trying to enjoy doing things that I tried to enjoy them even. At the beginning I had to try to enjoy them. I didn't, but that's also when I picked up the guitar for the first time during that period of my life. Before then I hadn't played the guitar ever, and it was really difficult. It took me 12 weeks to just learn some basic things with the guitar. And I found it really hard. I had to put every day, I was doing 2 hours a day, every day. Just learning about myself and what I liked and whether it was going to work or not, and what I enjoyed and things like that. And so I started to do things like go on some trips by myself. And in the trips that I went on by myself, I'd feel myself and feel how empty I felt, and how friendless I felt, things like that, you know. So these are things that I had to remove from myself so that I could recognise myself. And you know, eventually I, during that time, reconnected with some people that I knew as well, you know, that I knew many years earlier. I even did things like visiting my old childhood residences and just saying, you know, and trying to feel myself being there, you know, just to recognise what happened in my childhood and what went on. And so I did a lot of things like that, just trying to find, to discover who I was. And of course, that all opened me up to dealing with what was going to, the bigger problems that would come later, which was all about being Jesus problems. Right? But without doing all of that work first, I would never have come to the memories of other things. Right? I wouldn't have been able to do that either. So it was a solid process that I engaged with a lot of passion, actually. It was just, and also obviously I was being guided, but I didn't even really know I was. You know, I didn't really understand that. Oh, I felt like going here, so I did, or I felt like going there, so I did. You know, obviously at that time somebody was leading me down these tracks, you know, or making suggestions. Some good people, you know, making suggestions, and I'd only choose to do things that were harmonious with being an emotional being, and being truthful, and being loving, and being humble to my feelings. So anything that was suggested to me that suggested the opposite of that, I wouldn't do. Make sense? So if somebody tried to suggest to me that I was special or something, I go, that's stupid. You know, I'm not doing that, you know, because I'm just equal to everybody else. So that's out of line, so I'm not doing that, you know. Not going there, and I'll let myself feel about how the suggestion got made and all that, but I wouldn't go there. If somebody suggested to me, oh, make some money like on the stock market or something, no, not going there. It felt wrong in the sense of like it was just making money with nothing being created. I wanted to, if I was going to create something, I wanted it to benefit somebody, not just to benefit me, like make money. I wanted it to actually have a long-term benefit. So this is why I during that phase of my life, I started doing some property development, because I thought, well, people can live in their houses. People, you know, in Australia in particular at the moment, there's a shortage of rental properties. I don't know if it's like that here, but you know, I thought if I can put together some stuff and get some people in the houses, then it's at least benefiting them as well as me, right? And at least there's going to be some outcome that's going to be worthwhile to humanity, in the sense that there's a house that's built there that people can live in for 100 years. Let's do them properly too, I thought, you know, like instead of making little boxes where crap little houses where everything doesn't work, let's make them so the kitchen works and the bathroom works and the bedrooms work and everything's really comfortable living. In fact, what I did was I used to live in one of them, generally for anywhere up to a year, to make sure that it was actually livable, you know, that you could actually enjoy it. So during this phase, I actually had no furniture except a bed and one lounge and a computer, because that was my work. But aside from that, no furniture. And I just moved that little bit of furniture to a new house and stayed there for a while, and moved it to a new house, stayed there for a while. Just so that I could feel that, was the design stuff working? How did I feel about design? What was going on with it? Did I like designing houses, you know? And I loved it. Like I learned things about myself in this process. Yeah? I lost a whole lot of it. I had to sell the whole lot. I ended up with none of it at the end of it. I developed nearly $4 million worth of property and ended up with none of it in the end. Because as soon as I found out who I was, I started wanting to do that, and in the process of doing that, any profits I got from the houses got spent on that, and in the end I had to sell all the houses so I could keep doing that. And I ended up with one property at the end, and the one Mary and I are now living in. Right? And that was it. Because I got rid of everything and spent all the money on teaching divine truth after that. But But it was a very strong part of working out my nature, my personality, who I was, what I liked, what I don't like. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I didn't do it for the sake of creating an empire. I did it for the sake of building who is this soul? Who is me? Make sense?
Yes.
And if you focus on that as a priority, you will find that you will get assisted to have experiences. Every experience will end up at least breaking even. In the sense you won't lose anything from the experience, but you will gain a whole heap of knowledge that is like priceless about yourself, that you can now flick into the next thing you choose to do. Make sense? So now you're not focused on creating an empire, you're focused on discovering you. And in the process of discovering you, you will have done good things for other people because you've reduced your sin while you're doing this, right? So you'll do good things for other people, which will benefit your soul, but more importantly, you'll come to see who you are. And more importantly than that, you'll come to like who you are. And then after that, love who you are. And then after that, love loving who you are. Does that make sense? Like you enjoy the whole thing. But it takes time to go from the undeveloped 2-year-old, like who am I, to that point. It's not something you're going to be able to do overnight.
Oh yeah, because I panic at the thought that I need to have God in order to progress. But if I don't believe in God, then how will I ever progress? So
well, you'll get to a point. What I got to was I started connecting during this phase. Also, I started connecting to my feelings about God.
Yeah.
Before then, I was pretty scared of God, I suppose you could say. I was brought up in a religious faith that was quite that God punishes, destroys the wicked.
Yeah.
And by this stage, I'd left the religious faith, and they treated me as if I was wicked. So that meant that I was going to get destroyed, like according to that faith. And so, I had to work through that as a part of this process. Like, what did I feel God was? And this is also during this phase I started feeling how God, like I started feeling my care of my 2 sons. And I started feeling how much God cares for me, even if I don't want to talk to God, God still cares for me. And even if I do the wrong thing, God wants to just help me out and correct me. He doesn't want to severely punish me over and over and over again with eternal damnation. He wants to help me redeem. He wants to redeem me. I come to the conclusion that that's what God wanted. And it was only then that I started sort of longing again for God. Does that make sense? Longing for God.
Yes.
Have a relationship with God. But that took me time too. It was the same thing. I had to come to that discovery. I had to work through those attitudes that had developed in this life, absorbing the religious faith I was in, a Christian religious faith. And I had to work through the attitudes I had to myself and to my own sin and all that kind of stuff in order to come to the conclusion that actually, even though I had sinned, but not in the way the religion told me I had, but even though I had sinned, that God still wanted a relationship with me. Just because when my own sons sin, I still want a relationship with them. Right? So, and I'm just a man, I'm not God. So surely if God is my father, if I sin, God would have a better attitude to me than I have to my own boys. Right? So I started working my way through that sort of emotionally as well, and coming to the conclusion that actually, no, there were certain things that were truths, and to the point where by the time I was 40, so we're now talking 7 years later, I was nearly 41 actually, I started having strong feelings about soulmates and a longing for soulmate and other things like that, and became more open to truths associated with those fundamental truths, fundamental truths about me being a half of a soul and so forth. Before then I wasn't I didn't know. I wasn't open to that emotionally in this life. And this is bearing in mind that our soul already knows all this. I was still not open. We were like, all the 14 are extremely shut down. Emotionally, extremely shut down. Mary will tell you, Corny will tell you, all extremely shut down. And it took me concerted effort to undo that. Undo the sin that covered the real nature. Yeah?
Yes.
Now, in our case, we don't have to discover our 2-year-old soul, obviously, we're 2,000 years old, but we had to get rid of all the mind-based philosophies. Remember, I drew the minds here earlier, the mind-based philosophies that kept us away from it, you know. But it's very fundamentally the same process, you know, that you'll have to go through.
From your unified soul.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, the mind keeping you away from your unified soul.
Correct, yeah.
You're not going to a 2-year-old soul like us.
That's
but
right.
A unified soul. Because
yeah.
that's,
it's even more difficult.
One of the things that's so hard for me to comprehend, and I just probably can't, is that you guys you're in these bodies, but you're also in the spirit. I mean, you're way beyond my comprehension, I guess is the best way to say it.
And it was way beyond mine too. As AJ, you know, as Alan John Miller.
But you guys chose to come back in this form to help us, to actually model to us.
Correct.
How to do this.
Correct.
It's incredible.
Yeah, because we knew that if we did it any other way, you would all go, yeah, see, they got it all easy.
Yeah.
They don't know the troubles. They don't know the trauma. They don't understand anything. They just come back as angels, like, and look at them, like, look what they can do. We can't do any of that, you know. And if we came back any other way, we could see the majority of humanity would not understand what needs to be done. But if we can model what needs to be done and show you through our own lives what needs to be done and show you the benefits of doing it, eventually you'll gain some faith to do it yourself. Yeah?
Yeah. And you knew that making that choice, is that you knew you were going to have to go through this extraordinary psychological thing. To me, that's a kind of love I can't comprehend, you guys. But I just thank you so much for it. Like, it's really hard for me to comprehend that kind of love, that willingness to know that you were going to go through this very painful experience.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that sometime in your future you will comprehend it.
I hope so.
Yeah. Many of our celestial friends feel the same way. They just haven't reached the place where they can return. Yeah. And now there's little point in doing it either. But, you know, many of them feel the same way as we felt for many, many years, you know, wanting to return gives us lots of opportunities, including the opportunity to talk about this with you. Because this is, I know it's not, for us it's not the same. It's a lot different from a psychological perspective as it is for yourself. But in a way, you're sort of in the same position to a degree in that the real personality and nature of yourself has been so far removed from you by the experience that now you're going to have to go through a process that allows you to rediscover it. To discover it for the first time, actually. It's not a rediscovery. It's a for the first time discover it, you know? And if we can demonstrate to you how that is done, then, and actually do it, and so that you can see it happening, then maybe you'll have a bit more confidence in doing it yourself, right? And can increase your faith. But I can assure you, it is something you're going to have to do for yourself. Remember, you're the one with the free will. And nobody can discover you for you. You know, many of you sort of believe, oh, I get told this from a spirit, or I get told that from a spirit, and the spirit's telling me this, and the spirit's telling me who my soulmate is, and the spirit's telling me, you know, none of that is actually going to work, because you have to discover you, for your own sake, so that you come to believe in you. You know, it's sort of like when somebody else tells you something, it almost means nothing, to be honest. Because, and particularly when they tell you something about yourself, it almost, you'll find that it barely touches you. Because unless you feel that about you, and you have discovered that about you, and you know that to be true, then you're not going to be convinced. And what I've found is you can have 1,000 people telling you something, whether it's right or wrong, either way, you're probably not going to be convinced. You have to go through the experience yourself in order to get convinced. Right? And this is the same with regard to receiving God's love. You must at some point go through the experience yourself in order to be convinced. I can encourage you, influence you, try to suggest to you things, and try to help you deal with why it's not happening and what a real longing feels like. But at the end of the day, I can't have your longing for you. And I can't express your personality and nature for you. These are things that come from you. And you must discover it and you must do it. Right? And the same applies to me for me. But the same applies to you for you. And applies to everyone in the world for themselves. Right? There is no Redeemer other than God. There is no Redeemer. There is no, Messiah in the sense of the Messiah who's going to save me from myself. Right? The only Messiah there's ever going to be is a person who educates you how to discover you. Yeah? And helps you go through that education. Help you understand it for yourself. Developing a free will-based desire to do it for yourself. Makes sense?
And part of that education is that we're children of God. That's a big, huge part of the
That's
education.
a big part of the education, but there's other
Yes.
You are a soul. You're not the bodies.
Right.
You are a soul.
Right.
You're half of a soul. Another big part of the education.
Yes.
What is the structure of you? Who are you? And most of you at this stage still, even though you've heard of soulmates, you still think of yourself as yourself, but you're not. You're a half of self, right? At some point, hopefully, we can demonstrate what that looks like, right? In terms of being half of something rather than the whole of something. And this will help you with your faith, right? But it's all a part of you discovering what the truth is and how that truth applies to you. You follow? Mm-hmm. Because unless the truth is applied to you, you're not going to experience the joy of it. See, a lot of people we find are very passionate about hearing God's truths when we're talking about, how the universe is constructed, and spheres and the spirit world and all these other very fascinating, lovely subjects, But when we start talking about you and your sin in particular, everyone goes into these meltdowns and goes, I don't want to hear about that. Take me back to
the stars, the galaxies.
All the other things, right? But the problem with that thinking is you're not going to enjoy the universe unless you learn how to enjoy you. You understand? Because when you are carrying around inside of yourself a lot of self-attacking, self-belittling, self-denigrating emotions, anything that happens external to yourself is just a distraction and frequently is not going to make you happy. Right? And this is why this process is important. Because the more you relieve yourself of the burdens of the sin, and the more you develop this 2-year-old soul to help it grow into an adult who has will and knows how to use it, and who has personality and knows how to use it, and has nature and knows how to use it, right? You've got personality, one personality talk, right? Personality, smile. Yeah. And that personality is displayed. Not just to you, but to everyone around you, where you're confident about being that person, right? Now you'll start to enjoy your life and you'll start to experience bliss and happiness. Remember that was you.
Yeah.
How do I get happy when I've got this problem? But that's how you get happy. So, and God wants to help you go there. And God knows you've had a bad start. And everybody, like I said, on earth generally has. Very rare to find a person on earth who has actually had a parent who's been educated and who has knowledge about the soul and the God's truths and the spirit world and the personality of the person, and allows the person to be personality but still have laws and understand the laws and understand the operation of the laws and how they affect you. You think, have you ever met anybody who's had that education? I never have. There's a few people that we're talking to in Australia now who are trying to do that with their children, and the results are really good, but it's a very rare thing for that to have occurred. So you've got to stop getting on your own case about that. You've got to just go, had a bad start. But it's just a start, and no matter how old you are, you're babies still. Well, you're babies metaphorically, in the sense that there's the 2-year-old soul buried there somewhere. But you're also babies in the sense that even if you're 70 or 80 or 90, it's nothing in the scheme of time in terms of what your life will be. Right? And everybody, even with a bad start, all the people with a bad start, I've got many celestial friends who had a terrible start in life, and they are very powerful beings now. Right? And there are even people who, without God, had a bad start, and now they're in the 6th sphere enjoying their 6th sphere life. And with all the other people, some of whom might have had a better start, but they're still there, all in the same place now, because it doesn't really matter what the start is. What matters is how you then choose to continue the journey. That's what matters. And that's going to be all about you exercising this will of yours to the degree where you realise the important thing is for you to learn about yourself so that you can become happy. The happier you are, the happier you're able to make everybody around you. The happier you are to be the happy you in life, and that's going to have an infectious quality on the people around you. Right? And so and instead of making your passion in life your money-making schemes or your, your comfort, high comfortable home levels or whatever, make that your first passion, and then all these other things will start coming to you as a result. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the finish of that answer.
Thank you.
So let's have another question. You ready for another question? So we'll go up to Clint. Yeah.
I know you've offered probably the best solution, getting to know yourself so that you can help stop the spirits that are bothering you. But
Yeah.
do you have any other things that would be of benefit to help with spirits that are pushing us around?
When you've got spirits bothering you, so now we're talking about, just rub that off and we'll talk about spirit influence, shall we? A bit.
Maybe we can just define spirit influence a little bit.
Yeah, so spirit influence ranges from small degrees of people just dropping thoughts into your mind, and you have a tendency to just follow those thoughts thinking they're your own, right the way through to you getting totally overcloaked and doing exactly what a spirit wants all day, every day. It can range between those two places, right? Now, if we look at all spirit influence, the way they can do what they can do is only by what you allow them to do. But it's not what you allow in your head. Remember, it's your soul, which is, the brain of your soul is emotions. It's what your soul allows them to do. So here you are, you're half of the soul, connected to your spirit body and your physical body. And you've got a mind which exists in your spirit body, and a brain, which exists in your physical body. And you've got the brain of the soul, which is your memories. And your beliefs. And part of memories are your emotions, as you correctly stated. Right? So you've got your soul, which is the real you, your personality, your nature is all there, encapsulated in your soul. And then you've got the mind of the spirit body, which governs the physiological functions of your spirit body, and also the operations of your intellect. In other words, your logical responses. But it also governs your physiological responses of your spirit body. So your spirit body has a heart, and it keeps your spirit body's heart beating. And your spirit body has an energy system, keeps all that working. Your spirit body has organs, keeps all those functioning, and so forth, right? And then you've also got your physical body, which also has a brain, which keeps all of the different functionings of all your body working in a similar manner to what the spirit body does as well. So you've got all this sort of, this is you. You could say it's half of you, really, because there's another half of you, isn't there, with that, all the same thing going on. And your attraction is?
Females.
You sure? Because you seemed quite uncertain.
No, it is.
Yeah, you're sure, right? Yeah. Okay, so the other half of you, female, right? And she has got the same thing going on, right? She's had a whole different experience to you, but she's got the same. Her design is exactly the same. Right? Now, in amongst all of this, if this soul has addictions, which are, you could say what your addictions are. Here's another definition for addiction. It's what you love in disharmony so it's your loves that are in disharmony with God's love. Right? Do you understand what I mean by that? Yeah? So everything you love that God doesn't love, right, that's in disharmony with God's love. And they become your addictions. Your addictions, you love them. You know, you're like, I want this. Right? So let's say one of those addictions is I want the feeling that I'm special. Let's say. Right? You've been prone to this in your life, wanting the feeling that you're sort of special in the sense of, because, and it comes from a history where your dad has been competitive, not treated you, if you think about your relationship with dad, which you really don't have, right? Yeah, you don't really know who he is, right? You can say whatever you want to say.
No, I don't.
No,
Not really.
that's right. And so you've not really had a dad who's upheld you in any way or made you feel like you're a unique person or anything like that. And so now you're looking for somebody to do that for you, right? So that's an addiction. The hole is there of not being cared about in childhood, and therefore the addiction gets created, right? So now you would like somebody to do that for you. Now, no person you've ever met on earth has ever done it for you. But there are a whole heap of people who are unseen, who are happy to do that for you as long as they get some things in return. Follow? People who you can't see, but they're happy to make Clint feel better about himself as long as Clint does some things. And what does Clint have to do, Clint? There's some things you already know you have to do to get this feeling of feeling good about yourself. What are they? I've put you on the spot, I know. What do you have to do with women in order to feel good about yourself?
Please them, get
Yeah.
their approval.
Okay, and then what happens then?
And then I feel better about yourself.
Yeah, but how much approval do you got to get from them? Are you happy with just they like you, or how far is it got to go? Do they have to have a sexual relationship with you, or How far does it have to go?
It depends, I guess.
Yeah? They have to either mummy you or have a sexual relationship with you.
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
No, yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's how far it's got to go. Now, these spirits know that. The spirits know that's when Clint's going to feel good about himself. So what do? I'm a spirit. I'm thinking I'm helping you out, man. I also like the girls a bit. I'm not getting to have any of those girls in my life, in my spirit state. So what do I get to do? If I can tease things up for you, and you and I got a connection, I can maybe experience what's going on between you and the girl. You follow? I can experience that through what you experience. Because you and I have a connection. Because I'm propping you up emotionally, I need something back from that. You follow? So, does that make sense to you in your life, that this has happened?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. So what happens is the spirit ends up directing the course of your life and your relationships because you are seeking that feeling of like having
A
dad's
woman.
approval.
And also having a woman approve of you as well.
Yeah, but primarily you want these male spirits to make you feel special and important.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, man, we'll do that with you.
Yep.
And they even give you the feeling, oh, you're special and
You're a great guy, mate.
Um,
that kind of feeling
yeah.
all the time.
all the time.
Yep.
But they're also directing you towards relationships with women that they know will meet some emotional addictions in yourself, but they get to have sexual interactions through you with those women.
Yeah.
And so it corrupts your soulmate attraction as well, because in the end, they're going to put pressure on you even to have these relationships.
Yeah.
You're going to be kind of open to it because you want the feelings from them and you quite like the feelings with the women, but it corrupts your sense of yourself as well because you get confused then, what's my feeling, what's theirs?
That makes sense? Yeah. So what happens really if you sort of deconstruct all that? Can you see what's happening first is that there's loves in things that you would love that are out of harmony with God's love. So addictions, in other words, that are sins, like the things you want, right? That from God's perspective, a person who loves would not want. Right? But because you've missed out on them in childhood and not prepared to deal with the emotions associated with missing out on them in childhood, there's a desire to engage them. And as a result of the desire to engage them, you're going to attract spirits who think they're being good to Clint, being kind to Clint. We're helping him work out his life. Right? And they will assist you to get the feelings that you desire. As long as they also get the feelings they desire. So sometimes what happens for you is that when you start to think about doing something that's against what they would like, what do?
They harass me, push me pretty hard.
So a bit louder.
They harass me.
They harass
push
you.
me around and
Push you.
do really weird things, make me feel really, really shameful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really, really scared.
They punish you for having those thoughts.
Yeah. And I don't even know if I had them or if they just put them in my head.
Correct. So they even make you question whether they were your own thoughts or not.
Yeah.
And they do this because what it does is it causes you to get frightened and then detune from what you were going to do for yourself. You follow me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gives them some level of control over you then. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you listen to, I think it's the second presentations we did this year in England.
Yeah.
We talked to, and I think it was on the second and the third days, we talked to a bunch of young fellows who have the same problem.
Terrible.
Who are getting influenced by these spirits. And we also talked to the spirits who were involved. I think the spirit's name was Errol.
Yes.
Errol.
Yeah.
And to get their reasoning on why they were doing it. What was going on? Why were they doing this? And this Errol character was actually connected to one of the audience, young fellows in the audience. And we through that process demonstrated how all this sort of dynamic works. Make sense? So I would suggest you have a good listen to all of that. Yeah. Now, in terms of how to have a listen to all that, how does he have a listen to all that?
I guess it's on YouTube.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 exposure.
Yeah.
And then labeled.
All the talks in some
Yeah.
form
Yeah.
are available
Yeah.
either through audio or video.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And also, once we get home, they'll all be available on a website too. But
Yeah, but not yet.
if you want to listen before then there's other sites that have
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But,
And,
you know what I'm saying?
no.
But I want to just say to you that what happens to these guys is happening for you.
Yeah.
So if you can understand the dynamic and understand the addictions inside of you that drive it, you can actually disconnect from these guys who are badgering you. Whenever you do what they want, they don't badger you so much. Whenever you don't do what they want, they badger you a lot. So how to tell whether you're doing the right thing or not?
If you get badgered.
Because the more you get badgered by them. Does that make sense? The more they pressure you, you know, I must be doing something right. Does that make sense? But that's not how it feels, is it?
No.
That's the trouble, right?
And the tricky thing is that you touched on just then is just be mindful, like when you've engaged in some behaviour that you might feel a bit ashamed about, then, which they've actually influenced you into. Then they will try and use that to make you feel really bad about yourself.
Yeah.
So it's
They'll use as many methods they can to undermine your will.
yes. So he's going to require some humility to feel ashamed, to just feel, if you feel you've done something wrong, feel it, but you don't have to believe everything they're telling you that you want or you think that's really nasty and dark.
And don't believe they are well motivated.
No.
Because they are not.
And when they threaten you to get into these really downers on yourself, this is what happens often. They build you up because you know, yeah, you're
While
a great
you're doing
guy.
what they want.
Is that dad opening in you that you want a male to make you feel good? They build you up and make you feel invincible. You go out and do all these things, and then if you start to have some qualms about it, or you want to do something different, or
following you.
something that they don't want you to do, just anything, then they'll try and do the opposite thing, undermine you and make you feel bad about yourself. You're terrible and ashamed. And it's just to recognise this dynamic as it's happening and be humble to both the feelings with your dad and your mum and the shame, and then they can't manipulate you.
Yeah.
But
at the moment, they know they can. They know that they can bring enough pressure and enough words in your ear and enough bothering of your mind and enough sleepless nights and enough of these things. They know they can pressure you in all different ways, and you will eventually respond just to get them off your back. Right? So the way I handle, because I get a lot of spirit attack, usually a couple of million spirits all day, every day for the last, for most of my life, since I was born. So I get a lot of it, and what you need to learn how to do is learn how to live a morally sound life, and when there's more pressure from them, you do the opposite of what they pressure you to do, or try to pressure you to do. Now, of course, that makes them more angry, but eventually what happens is they leave. You know, so I've had whole groups of spirits come in my life, and many that have been with me since I was born are now leaving. They've given up trying to kill me. Now they want somebody else to kill me. So now they're trying to work on people around me to kill me. Right? Because I've given up trying to kill me directly. It hasn't worked very well. You know, so now what they're trying to do is influence other people to kill me. So, and there's many people who come up to me, as Mary knows, and says, oh, the spirits told me to kill you. You know, like, oh yeah, what are you going to do about that type of thing? You know, and obviously those kind of people often are just coming into my life just to threaten me and so forth. And frequently when I react in a loving manner, there's little they can do about it, and they leave my life. Yep. So you need to see this as a threat, bribery, blackmail situation. Now, in 2013 or 12, yeah?
11?
I was just listening to it last night.
Oh, yeah? There you go. What year was it?
11.
2011?
Yeah.
If you look at on the downloads, there is a talk about threats, bribery, blackmail,
Oh, yeah.
that I gave, I think it was a 2-day seminar actually, at Merton, from memory, in Australia. And in that talk, I talk about the dynamics of somebody influencing you and what they will attempt to do. And it's very important for a person who's spirit influenced to understand that dynamic. So I would suggest you have a listen to that talk. Yeah. Makes sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Good day. You got any more questions about that?
I guess the only question I would have would be about the whole with my father. Like I can't even feel
important.
That.
Yeah. And usually when we've had an absent father or a father who's competitive, or both, we end up with these quite severe holes about wanting, or a mother, I must say, who is highly invested in you as her son, which I think you've actually had. Yeah. So when you have both of those things, you end up being in a state where you need to prove yourself to your dad, but you need to get nice feelings from the women at the same time. So you need to prove yourself to your dad that you're worthy of dad's attention when you haven't had any. You get to want to prove that you're worthy enough. And then, of course, when your mother has treated you like you're better than all other men, there is also this sort of feeling that develops over time that you are, but you've got to pay the penalty of that with your mother, right, in terms of what she demands of you. And these two dynamics usually set up this kind of stuff with spirits. And so many young men we meet,
very common.
Very common, isn't it, babe? Yeah. Many young men we meet have these problems. So you're not alone in having them. There's many young men that have them. Yeah. And when I say young, most men a lot of men under 40. How old are you, Duncan?
41.
41, yeah. So yeah, you're still pretty young, right? But a lot of men have them. And it's just the same way of dealing with them each time. But the spirits will put you through a bit of a, should we call it a rigmarole? It's going to be tough for a bit. They're going to put you through a bit of a ringer because they've established this bond with you over many years. And for them, leaving you and having to find somebody else who will do what you were doing for them, it's going to take years to groom that other person. They would rather get you back. Does that make sense? So they're going to put you through some pressures. And this is where you need to learn to pray to God and long for some help from some spirit friends who can help you deal with that pressure. It's all going to be psychological pressure. Make sense? It's all going to be manipulation of your psychology, manipulation of your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts about yourself and so forth. That's what they're going to do. And it is tough, but once you break it, you'll be like, who am I? Like, isn't this freedom now? Like you for the first time, you realise that a lot of the things that you're choosing to do have just been driven by their desires rather than your own. Yeah. So I'd encourage you to do it. We've had, in the same talk I was talking about in England, there was probably 1/4 of the audience of young men. There were a lot of young men in that audience. Probably 1/4 of the audience had the same problem. Yeah.
And these spirits, they kind of hijack your life, and they're trying to just have like an adolescence through you. And it means
missed out life through you.
It means that you end up not really creating in your own life or grounding yourself in something in your life, in
or
a
growing up, or
relationship,
have responsibilities, or
having a project, a home, a wife, or what. It doesn't have to be those things, but just something that you really like desire and go for. You end up being aimless at their whim.
And a lot of men who are influenced by them call themselves free spirits.
Yeah.
But they're not free at all. They're totally
under the
thumb of these spirits, right?
Because they can't make a commitment, they're just pushed around all the time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, and you're pressured not to make a commitment. So that's part of their influence.
Yeah, they don't want a commitment. They don't want you to have one relationship. They don't want you to have friendships other than friendship with them. They don't want you to have a life where you have responsibilities, because that would then tie up their life through you. Mm-hmm. So they don't want that. They don't want. So a lot of times the men who are controlled by these spirits think they're having a real wonderful free life and everything, but actually they're just being manipulated into feeling and thinking certain ways due to their their loves, their addictions, you know. Yeah. And so it's important to understand the dynamic, and it's also important to understand that when you try to break the dynamic, there's going to be pressure. And it's going to be pretty uncomfortable. Because they'll try to bother you day and night, you know, they'll try to push you around. It'll take a bit of time. And you've got to be prepared for that, you know, prepared for the process of breaking the relationship, basically. Yeah. And they are quite invested in the relationship with you because they've been with you for such a long time. So, you know, these things usually these spirits see the trajectory of your life really quite early in your life, like when you're young, usually even before you're fully developed, like mentally, and they connect to you then, and then they guide the rest of your life. And that's happened to so many of these young guys we meet, you know, where the spirits have been around them since, you know, they're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, just before puberty, and then many times during puberty, connecting to them as well, you know, for the first time. And so oftentimes they're with you now. If you're 40, they've been probably with you for 25 years at least, you know. 31 years is how long they've been with you. So what does that make you? You're 41, so 10.
Wow.
Yeah, they're saying 31. There you go. So, you know, how do you know what you like? It's really a lot of your life is what they like, or what they feel they missed out on. Yeah, difficult. Yeah. Good. Yep. Susan.
A couple of things. One is related, both of the questions are related to what you're talking about with Katerina, Tara, and Clint. I guess the first one is, how do you tell the difference between when you're being attacked and you're actually making progress? Like it's not an attack because of your sin, it's attack because you're actually moving out.
Can I first say to all of you, it's very rare you're going to get attacked by spirits for your sin.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's like all related.
A good spirit won't attack you if you're getting out of sin. A good spirit will be cheering you on.
Okay,
and a spirit who has their own sin that they're protecting or wanting, they're not going to attack you when you're getting out of sin, because
Does that make sense?
Yes, because what they say is that you're being attacked because of your sin. Like, this is the reason why.
You're being attacked because you're trying to break your sin, and they don't like it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And any spirit who loves you won't attack you anyway.
Right.
So it has to be a spirit who doesn't really love you who's attacking you. You
anyone who attacks you doesn't love you, whether they're a person or a spirit.
Right? So if you're getting attacked by a spirit, it's not because of them not liking your sin. It's because they like it and you're trying to give it up.
Okay.
Right? So anytime you're getting attacked by a spirit, it's a good sign that you're making some changes.
It's also the people around me, physically.
Yeah, that's also a good sign that you're making changes, but with one caveat.
Okay.
Many of you who listen to Divine Truth get a bit arrogant. And when I say a bit, a lot.
Okay.
You start going, oh, I know a lot now, and all the other people, they don't know much anymore. You know, I know what's going on here. I can see what's going on there. And in that arrogance, it connects to some other sins that you've got going on in your soul, and it makes you feel good about yourself. But actually, when you're like that with people, they're not going to like you very much.
No.
Which is understandable.
Yes.
You understand?
Mm.
Because, so the first thing I would question is, am I being humble with people? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're being humble with people, in other words, admitting to your own sin, and you're open to hearing and open to listening to people, and yet people are attacking you because you're choosing to do something that you feel is working your way towards what love would do, then naturally that's also going to be because they don't want you to change. Right? And you can love people who don't want you to change.
Yep,
you don't have to attack them in return and say how bad they are and all that kind of stuff. You can just withdraw from them and deal with your feelings yourself. You don't have to be in their face going, "You're such a bad person, you know, like I've learned all this stuff and it's so hard for me, can't you see how hard for me it is?" And you know, you don't have to do all that with the person, right? What you can do is you say, well, if you're going to continue to attack me, I'm doing this. If you're going to continue to attack me, I don't want to be around you anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And make some decisions about that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to put up with the abuse, do you? But you also don't need to get abusive yourself. But see, if you're in a codependent relationship with them, you'll want them to come along with you.
Yes.
You understand?
That's where it gets
And
so
that's
murky.
where you get sinful.
Yeah.
You're wanting them to come along with you on
That's
the road.
your sin now.
That's your sin now.
Not honouring their free will.
They have free will. They're allowed to make their own choices and decisions. And if they don't want to come along with you, well, too bad.
Just go ahead and let them be.
That's right.
Deal with you have to deal with some emotions in
You
that
gotta
case,
have to.
don't you?
Tremendously.
Yes. Your investments in them coming along is all sin that you need to release.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, because the second part is, my son has a lot of that, and he completely doesn't want to come along
No,
or even
and
hear anything.
as parents, we
about
often have a lot of
spirits.
guilt with our children, and we have a lot of other emotions with our children, and we think we would like what's best for them, but actually we're often forcing their will into that state. And we've got to give up all that. And by the way, you're not his mother.
No.
You're his caretaker, right? And done a bad job. And I don't mean that
I don't think it like
to hurt you. I'm just saying,
it's a fact.
if you think of before you learnt divine truth, you educated him a certain direction, and now you're trying to uneducate him in the same direction you just educated him. You can imagine for a child how confusing that is. It's pretty confusing, like getting an education in one direction, and then, mum turns, whatever age now.
How old's your son now?
He's 34.
Yeah, he's 34. And how old are you now?
59.
So mum's in her 50s, found divine truth, and gone, oh, I did the wrong thing, now I'm going to try to reverse that. And he's going, what the hell? Like, you were a good mum before, now look at you, you're turning out to be a bad mum. What's going on?
He knows I was a bad mom.
Well, it depends, you see, there's a lot of things he's come to love about your sin.
Yes.
Right? And the things he came to love, when you start changing that sin, he's going to go, I don't like you much anymore. You're changing in all these ways that are not nice. Before you used to cook and clean and bottle wash after me, and before you used to pick up all my rubbish, and I used to be able to come to you with my problems with my girlfriends and my wife and my kids and whatever else, and now you're saying, look after it myself. What's going on, Mum? Like, you've just become so callous and abusive now towards me, and you don't care about me anymore, and he's going to pile on the guilt, right? Pile on the guilt. Yeah, and they get real good at it, because their addiction demands them being real good at it. The addiction you taught them to have, ironically, right? And this is why you've got to have a lot of patience with it, because not so much patience in the sense of putting up with it all the time, but patience in the sense of, I taught him to do exactly what he's now doing, and I taught him how to even do it, how to manipulate in the past and whatever. I taught him even how to do that. And now he's doing it, and I go, there you go, doing it. And you can just be honest, there you go, doing what I taught you to do. It's all wrong, of course. And the more they don't want to spend time with you, well, you know, many of you parents are desperate to spend time with your children. Right? I don't understand why. They have their own life. They're allowed to have their own life. They have free will. You know, they have their own soulmate, and it's not you. Right? It's not you. It's somebody else. Yeah, much closer to their age, probably. And so why are we so invested? Like, let them make their mistakes. They are God's children. God's got them in hand. The Lord's got them in hand. Whatever happens, you can be there to educate when they give you the opportunity, but not by force. Not by sitting down and saying, I need to talk to you again.
Yeah.
No? And the child says, I don't want to talk to you. And go, oh, but I need to talk to you. I'm your parent.
And it's dicey area because you've got to be so careful. You can think, oh, I've done it all wrong. I've got to fix it with him. But are you wanting to fix it or alleviate your own guilt?
Well, there's combination. Like
frequently.
When I release some, then it's more. Well, it's a trust in God issue. Like God is the parent, and God is working this out.
And I've done damage, and I need to feel the guilt of my damage without putting the guilt of my damage on them.
Yes.
I need to. If I feel guilty, instead of trying to correct it with them, I need to feel my guilt, work through the emotion, correct it with God. Then I'm in a space where I no longer feel guilty anymore, and now I can just be loving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, even if, say, this is your son, I'm you. Well, he's 34. If I come along to, what's your son's name? Evan, and I say I did all these things wrong, and it was this and that, and I shouldn't have done this and that.
No, you didn't, Mum. It's all good.
No, I did what you just said.
Yes, and he went, oh well, but
he said, get over it.
Yeah, because he can feel you were just guilty. He's like, now you're just putting more stuff on me. My guilt, your guilt. I don't want
He doesn't need to hear all that, right?
No.
Yeah.
But you know what? Even if Evan turned around and he dealt with it all, and he changed his whole life, your sin is still there. Of course, you've got to deal with it. You know.
Yeah.
So that a lot of parents we meet think, oh, if I could just change the effects,
of my sin,
my child was happy or functioning well, then it'd all feel like it'd all be okay. But actually, the sin's still there. You've still got to deal with it.
If you're not careful, it'll bring the illusion that things are better when it's not better inside your soul.
That's right. That's what I'm getting.
So your relationship might be better, and he might have forgiven you, and everything might be going smoothly now. But at the end of the day, if you haven't actually dealt with that yourself and become repentant for your own behaviour, then it's undealt with for you. And you'll carry that, you'll think, oh, my relationship with my son's real good now, so I don't need to deal with that, but you will still need to deal with it.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. And the reality is, the way you make it easiest for him to deal with it,
that's what
is not coming with your guilt and you're saying all the words, it's you dealing with it. Then it might be rough still, it's going to be rough for him to deal with it, but there won't be any pressure from you. There won't be anything coming from you to either still upholding the sin, because it's still in you, or your guilt or anything. That will be you're taking responsibility for that, and that gives him the most freedom to deal with it, no matter how old your son is.
It's good, Sydney.
Yeah, it's good. It's really
Okay. Andy?
Hey.
What's the time?
It's 3:45.
Last question, probably.
I have a question about what you talked about earlier with the intellect being different than what's in your soul and feelings. And the larger the difference, the more physical issues you might have.
Yep.
Including, you said, the kind of deterioration of certain parts of your body, like by your own body. So like autoimmune type things.
Yep.
I have that right here. I have a complete block right here.
Yeah.
My thyroid is completely shut down. Yeah.
Truth, Andy.
Truth speaking or truth accepting?
And truth living.
Truth living.
As well.
Okay.
Yeah. All three.
All truth.
But particularly speaking.
Okay.
Is it under or overactive your thyroid?
Under. So it was particularly after I had my daughter that it completely shut down.
Yeah.
to the point where
Well,
the
you
doctors were like,
feel what you feel about having your daughter. What did you expect having your
yeah,
daughter?
very different than what I ended up feeling. I was really excited to have her. I was looking forward to it.
So before you had it,
Before I had her,
you were looking forward to
I was
having
looking
her.
forward to having her.
Okay, so let's just write some of this down, shall we?
Yeah.
So this was before.
I
You
thought
were
this is gonna be great.
excited.
Yeah. I can't wait to meet her.
Okay, so what's that? That's hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
what
had
else?
these expectations that it was gonna be easy.
Should be easy.
I didn't even really know what to expect. I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
yeah.
All the mothers in the world collude to make you feel like it's going to be easy, even though they
It's going to be
so
hard.
much.
You've got to have it shot. But let's look at, there's more to it than that. What does having a child give you as a woman?
I hadn't really thought that I had any feelings about that.
Yeah, but you do.
I must.
Yeah, every woman does. You've talked to.
I'm not a real woman till I have a child.
Yep. So what's that really though? They're not valid.
Oh yeah.
So they make me valid as a woman.
I have never felt valid as a female, so I
No,
guess that
but
makes
having
sense.
a child makes me.
Okay,
Yeah. What does your mother feel about you having a child?
Oh, she was super excited.
Yeah.
She was kind
But
of like,
let's talk about super excited. What does that? How did that look? Did she want you to have a child before you even got pregnant?
I don't know if she did. She didn't really say anything
No.
to me.
What's her idea of a good woman?
Having kids and putting everything into them.
Yeah. Family.
It's almost
Role.
like
Getting your worth through.
worth through motherhood.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's before. It's all looking good.
Yeah, it's looking
Towards
good so
having a
far.
child. So I got to get pregnant. You know.
She was kind of an oops, but yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the feeling is
I was still excited.
got to get
So,
pregnant.
yeah.
So after, how do you feel?
It was immediate too that it was.
Yeah,
a
for many
change.
women it is. If they're honest with themselves, it is.
Yeah, nothing went how I planned.
Okay,
The
so
birth.
everything
So
was
already,
unexpected.
Everything was unexpected. I had no control.
No control. Yes.
I didn't
so
like that.
Out of control.
I shut down a bunch of fear that started.
Okay, lots of fears that you're trying to shut down.
Yep, and with
With
pain
the,
and
in the
everything.
labour.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
During
pain, fear of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to shut it down.
Yep, and the pain was really intense too. So. I
Yep, the
just-
more fear of pain you have, the more intense it becomes. Yeah, yeah. Keep going.
And at some point I completely shut down.
Yeah,
in
when you
the
say
labour?
completely shut down.
You mean in the labour or afterwards?
After.
Yeah.
Yep, when you say
During-
completely shut down,
during,
what do you mean? How did you feel towards your husband afterwards?
Afterwards.
Yeah. He got you pregnant.
Yeah, I don't feel like I was angry with him though.
Okay.
He was by my side and he was helping me along.
Yeah, yeah. But he wasn't going through it.
No.
It's not we were pregnant, is it?
I don't have
So
any
I'm
conscious.
pregnant. You're not pregnant.
I don't have any conscious
No worries.
that I
There
felt
is some there,
anything
but
negative.
we'll go back to them.
Okay.
Go on, keep going. This is all afterwards.
And this so you shut down immediately?
Yeah. Yes. I was like, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So no emotions, no.
No. Yeah.
So you went numb?
Yep. I went numb. I'm like, I can't do this. I
Too
can't.
emotional.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the pain. It was after she was born.
Yeah.
Things kept going wrong, and
Like breastfeeding and things like that.
Yeah.
Going wrong, nipples
Yeah.
hurting.
yeah, she had to get stuff sucked out of her mouth. She wasn't breathing. All
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah. So the child having some illness or some distress,
Yep.
which adds to the feeling like, it's all out of my control.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's all in my control.
Yeah.
I felt like a failure. Like
Yeah.
I was letting her
Failure.
down. I didn't want to feel that. And
Yeah.
of course, it was like affecting my worth too.
Of course.
Feeling like I thought
I'm no good
I
as
was
a
gonna be
mum.
able to do this, and I can't.
All
Yeah.
right, yeah. So now I'm failing in family, role, worth.
Yep.
All failing there.
Yep.
Yeah. So failing in every area.
Yeah, and I went numb, and then I just wanted to give up. I didn't want to do it I wanted to take it all back, and I wanted to not do it.
Yeah, see, that's angry now. These are now angry. See, these things are sort of things that happen, and then when we go into give up, or we're actually now getting angry about them happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's in anger, there's a couple of ways to respond. There's what many of you call fear is not fear, it's anger. When you say, I'm afraid, but I'm afraid, you're actually angry. Right? You're not afraid, you're angry. And you're angry because there's things you're going to have to deal with that you're not prepared to deal with, you don't want to deal with, you don't want to have to feel, you don't, so you're angry about it, but you call it fear, because the reason why you call it fear is a woman's allowed to call it fear. Because when a woman's afraid, other women and other men, sometimes other men, but mostly other women, come to your rescue, hopefully. Because every woman agrees you should never have to feel fear. Right? So start getting afraid, and then there's all these things that happen, and giving up is a product of the anger as well.
And I felt like I was going to die if I tried to do it, and maybe that was what I told myself.
Yeah. These are now the sin is feeding your mind with ideas, right? Many of which will be completely false, of course. Now, can you see the dynamic that was set up before? That's pretty like...
That I didn't even realize it was kind of...
And there's more than that, I must say. There's how, men would treat you, how men would view you. There's a lot of things in there. Your value in the family. There's all sorts of other things that you should do a full investigation on.
Okay.
But these are the before, here's the after. Can you see quite easily what's happened? Every expectation you had that you thought having a child would meet was not met.
Yeah.
Every expectation. Now remember, your addictions set up expectations. That makes sense to all of you. When you have an addiction, attached to every addiction is an expectation. So the expectation drives, when it's not met, drives your rage. So when you expect something, I expect to be easy, but it's hard. Right? The child is demanding all of my time, all of my attention. I have no time for myself. I've got no time to even think. The child's crying half the time. I don't know how to solve it from crying half the time. It's full of distress. I want the distress to go away. I've got all my own distress and I can't even feel my own. And the child's got all this distress, of course, feeling a lot of mine. But it's doing all these things, and I got no way. It's a little personality of its own right. I thought I could just go and it would be all right, and I can't. I'm going like this, and it's not all right yet. What's going on? I've changed the nappy, I feed it, and it's still not all right. What's going on? I've got no control over that. And so all of these expectations have been set up in most women, right? Are all completely false about having a child. Completely false, right? But you're told this since your own childhood. Since your own childhood as a girl. What a girl's given as a toy. A doll. Like,
with something to feed
from a child. How weird is that? A little 2-year-old girl, and she's given a doll, a little, supposedly a little child, to care for. Then she's not even developed enough age to even understand herself yet. I can understand maybe when she's 10 or 15 having to carry around a baby, a little doll for a while, to be educated what it's like to have to care for it every, But when it's 2, it's just really weird, to be honest. And so we do all of these. We give these children these toys, and particularly the girls in particular. Do you ever see, let's go home and get a doll for the boy child? That doesn't happen hardly at all, does it? Now the boy child might like to have the doll, oftentimes because he sees his sister have one and he wants one. But how many times by himself does he want to have one, or is it even conceived that he should have one? Very rare in modern society still, very rare, right? And the reason why is because there's all these expectations on the girls. For a role, family, worth, everything, all tied into it. Now, when it's not satisfied, it's like, the very thing that I thought that I was created to be, a mother, is the very thing that I'm failing at. And this is why there's a lot of postnatal depression. Right? Remember, depression is the suppression of anger. And anger is there because of the expectations that are not fulfilled. So most women find that they have all these expectations before they give birth. All of them are pretty much not fulfilled. Now they have anger, but they're not allowed to be angry, because to be angry and you're a mother, that's a bad mother.
Right. Yeah.
That's a bad woman. You're not allowed to be angry about it either. So you suppress the anger, and eventually, now you're allowed to be angry in your family, but the average woman isn't even allowed to be angry, and so she goes depressed. She gets into depression. And a lot of times that depression will last quite a number of years after giving birth, until the woman gets used to the idea they've got this little fella or girl to care for, and it's tough. And every new parent finds it tough. Caring for a child in sin, when you're in sin, is tough. Because there's all this reflected sin going towards the child. The child's having to cry every day just to let go of some of the sin that it's absorbed already. Right? It's tough. And it triggers you as well emotionally, because what it's saying is that the child is crying because you've got stuff to deal with that you don't want to deal with, and it's feeling the effects of it. Right? And it's not only yours, it's also Dad's that he or she is feeling the effects of. So if you do it and Dad doesn't, well, they're still going to be crying. Both of you are going to have to deal with it, And most men, what do they think? Caring for the child while the child's a baby is? Mum's the main carer, right? So most men are not dealing with anything coming from them about the problem either. Most men are not dealing with it. So the woman's feeling totally alone. All these expectations are not met. She's really frustrated and angry about it. She's not allowed to be really frustrated and angry about it. So she numbs out completely. And how that looks for different women. Sometimes it's depression, sometimes it's other things.
When did your thyroid sort of...
It was fine before.
Yes.
And then I had it tested like 6 or 7 months after she was born, because I started getting really weak and really tired, and
That's not why it was happening.
That's not why the thyroid happened.
That's right.
That was kind of effects from it, I guess, or whatever.
You think about how you felt versus what you could talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So you started feeling all of these things.
Did you
but were you allowed to talk about it with anybody?
No, I might have tried, but nobody wanted to hear about that stuff.
Of course not.
Because they're had judgments about it.
Correct.
And their own fears about.
Correct. And you are very frightened of other people's judgments.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now what do? Shut down truth. You shut down living in it, talking about it, sharing how you feel, saying how you feel, being honest about how you feel. Shut it all down.
And I had my own judgments towards myself.
Of course. It's the main reason why we shut down, because we've got our own judgments as well. So shut it down, and that straight away causes problems here, immediately. Yep. And those problems continue because you still haven't really been able to talk about any of it to anybody really.
Yeah.
You understand? And you certainly haven't dealt with it emotionally yet, right? In terms of...
I can feel that.
And to be honest, most women don't. So unless a woman loves the idea of having a child and loves the whole out of control and loves the whole feeling like a failure and is okay with it all, and some of you are, by the way, because you're so invested in being a mother that you think this is what it feels like being a mother. I'm sacrificing, this is fantastic. You know, and some of you are fine. Some of you are fine with that, but Mandy isn't. and so this is why the reaction is different than the average woman might be. You see, the average woman will often accept that, no, this is what they planned to have, this sort of, they planned to have this life of self-sacrifice for the sake of their children as a 20-year plan. Well, in fact, for many of the women, it's not just a 20-year plan, it's like their whole life plan. Yeah. They sacrifice their child and then their grandchildren too, many of them. Desperate to have grandchildren, as desperate as they were to have children, almost. Yeah. Because it makes them feel valid as a woman all over again when they can help their daughter have her children.
So that's how my mom feels.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm very different than her. Maybe it's just personality different, or
well,
I didn't really imbibe the sacrifice thing from her so much.
No. Mind you, that's partly because you're a fairly selfish woman, right? But it's also partly because of other issues where you could see, no, that actually isn't right either. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the selfishness will need to be addressed as an emotion, like as a sin. But there's other parts of it where you're right. But why is a woman's whole life just meant to be about her children? Like, in spirit world, you're not going to have any. And you're going to be there for thousands of years. So if you think your whole life now is about having children, when you get to spirit world and it's no longer about having children, what are you going to do with your life?
Right. Help take care of the
It's going to be,
billions of children.
Yeah, that's what you think. You won't be given any.
Because of that
Because of that emotion, you will not be given any.
Because when you've got that addiction, it's not very caring to your children, actually.
That's right.
Because a lot of it is about you.
The only people who look after children are those without that emotion. Right? So you won't even be given any in the spirit world either. Yep. So this is something we need to work through, right? As a society, it needs to be seen that women have a bigger role than just having children. And having children doesn't validate you as a woman. In fact, if anything, if you're not careful, it can completely damage your self-development. If you treat it in the wrong manner, and also completely damage the development of the children. Yeah. Because you're setting yourself up as a role as a mother rather than a teacher. You know, God's their mother, you're a teacher. You're their older sister, teaching them. That's the role, right? And the fact that you brought them into the world through a procreative act means that you are, to a degree, responsible for teaching them. But if you're not capable of teaching them, then give them to somebody who is.
Who would that be, officer?
Sorry?
Who would be capable?
Well, there's a lot of people who think they're capable, I suppose you'd say. But even give them to somebody who thinks they're capable. Because if you feel you're not capable, that's going to have an effect on what you're going to do with the child. You're not going to educate the child, right? The alternative is, if you treat it as an educational process for you and the child, then you'll do well.
Yeah.
You'll do well with it. But this is not how it's taught on earth, is it? If a woman gives away her child, whoa, well that's really bad. Yeah, that's how it's treated. In fact, that's the reason why there are many abortions. They'd rather have an abortion than give away their child. Because if you give away your child as a woman, you're treated much worse than if you've had an abortion. So they'd actually rather kill the child than give away the child. Isn't that true? Yeah. It's dead right. So that's how strongly entrenched it is that if you have a child and you've given birth to a child, you must, prove yourself as a good mother, you must even keep it. Right? Now, if we didn't have that attitude that you must keep it and that you're really bad if you give the child away, you know, there are plenty of people who haven't had children. There's going to be like about 8% of the world's population is gay, and some of them would like to have children to care for. So there's straight away like lots and lots of people who would like to have a child. Now I've got to go through these unending like processes to get an adoption, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is traumatic. That goes on for years oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to prove themselves over and over again to this person and that person, this person, that person, and yet they really would like to have a child, you know, and love a child and go through that process. So why not give your child to them? You see, when a mother is like, hears all that, she goes, oh, that's going to be terrible too. Because I'm just going to be made to feel guilty and bad about it for the rest of my life. And probably she is going to be made to feel that way by the society we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I made a joke about it before, but there is actually very little acknowledgement to expectant mothers of how difficult it is going to be when they give birth and in the aftermath.
Yeah.
It is a conspiracy amongst women. It's like a superiority game. I've watched it in the women around us even, who listen to Divine Truth. It's only when I speak to some of the women whose children are grown and I ask them questions, oh yeah, my labour was terrible and I dehydrated myself from trying to do all the breathing, and other ones tell me, yeah, I couldn't get the baby to sleep. And then I watch other young women around us who are giving birth for the first time. Nobody ever tells them, oh, it was really tough.
Isn't it?
It was really tough with my first child. You know, don't expect it's all going to be roses. Nobody tells you, do they? Nobody said that to you.
No.
All they said was, oh, it'll be fine. Isn't that exciting? It's lovely. And so women are giving birth with all this pressure that it's got to be easy because every woman around me makes out that it's easy, and it makes it even worse for you. Rather than if we had better education, where we said to women, look, you've got a lot of sin. Your baby's going to be...
It's going to be traumatic because you've got a lot of sin. If you had no sin, then your child wouldn't have any bad emotions to imbibe. And if your husband had no sin, by the way, it requires both.
Both, yeah.
And you got no sin, then the child would they'd be born smiling.
And would there be no pain for the woman if she has sin?
No, she'll probably, if not have an orgasm while she's giving birth, she'll find it easy.
Yes.
Mary, didn't she say you met some woman in France or something, or somewhere that she had an orgasm when she gave birth? Yeah.
I'm not recommending it, I'm just saying it'll be easy and a pleasure.
But it can be an educational process then when if you know, okay, I've got sin and my child's going to reflect it. If I love this child, I'm going to deal with my sin as this is being exposed in me. Parenthood gets a lot easier, and Louisa at home is a great example of that. But there's not a lot of truth being told on earth to parents about what it's like when you have your first child.
So
now, can I just stop now? How do I deal with it? Is the next question, right? So I'm in the state now where I'm still numb to emotion. I still feel like I'm a failure. I feel like giving up. I've got a fear of pain. I feel like life's out of control. My daughter is now 11. And she's out of control too, still.
And essentially you still feel a lot of these things, don't you?
I feel all of those things still, mostly, inside at least.
Yeah.
I've gotten good at managing certain things, and as she's gotten older, things have changed, but I still
feel that way, So these are feelings you're going to, they're stored. Remember we said this just before, that they're now stored as an experience in the soul that is going to have to be released, right? And the only way you're going to actually change is by reconnecting to the whole lot and releasing it. And many women, by the way, need to do this, right? Because many women have been taught, what they've done is they've gone, internally they've gone, being a mother was so important that I know I'm going to have all these things happening, but being a mother is more important than all those things. So I'm going to stoically now get away from all the things I felt, giving birth and new child and everything else, all the things I felt. I'm going to store all that and just be a good mum. Right? And as a result, a lot of the sin and the expectations that the sin came from, which are all like about my worth, my role, my family, why am I so excited about having responsibility? you know, that is going to be never ending for 20 years, all that kind of stuff. And all the reasons for all of those things will get exposed. And they are the causes of this state afterwards, and this is the effect of numbing out to the causes. Yeah.
Would this be also why I have a hard time connecting with her and how I just feel
Yep.
like there's a barrier between
Yeah, of
us all the
course.
time?
Yeah, right from birth, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, right from birth.
Yeah.
Because many mums don't realise, but they blame their children for the complete change of their life.
Mhm.
So their life has gone from a life of freedom to a life of slavery in many cases.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that's what it needs to be, I'm just saying that's what you're taught to do. But it's gone from a life of freedom to a life of slavery. Of course you're upset about it. Did it go from a life of freedom to a life of slavery for your husband?
No.
Oftentimes not, right? No. Although sometimes he feels it with regard to having to work all the
That's
time to get the
That's right.
bucks to bring home for the
Yeah.
family, right? But aside from that, he's not the one in the cold face of it all every single day. For often in Western society again, often he's not the one on the cold face dealing with the crying and the sicknesses and the illnesses and the trauma and the constant awake nights and the feeding and the nipples and the, you know, he's not dealing with all that. He gets to feel some responsibility issues, but oftentimes hardly any other things. This is why a lot of men don't go into postnatal depression, because they've got really not a lot to be angry about. And if they were angry about it, they'd probably take it out on you anyway, rather than feeling depressed about it, right? Because they're allowed to. But for the women, it's very different, and this is why these things happen. Yep. So the key again is going to be focusing on, okay, this is the effects, this is what happened, your thyroid issues, all because of not being even able to speak about it, talk about it, be honest about it, and particularly not allowed to be honest about it. Right? If you're honest about it, everyone around you criticises you. Everyone around you says, but don't you see, being a mother is great? You know, like, how is it great? Like how is being a mother great when you're in a state of sin? It's not very great. But honestly, ladies, when you're a mother, when you're in a state of sin, be honest, it's not very great. The birth's painful. The first few months afterwards are pretty traumatic in the sense of like, you don't know what to do, how to do it, and all that kind of stuff as well. Unless you've got someone who's teaching you and helping you and educating you, it's pretty difficult. You're a mother as old as the child is a child. So what I mean by that is when your child was 6 months old, you were a 6-month-old mother too. You knew as much as a 6-month-old mother knew, right? And nobody educated you beforehand. Most of it, all the time, they made it all flowery and isn't wonderful. You need to be a mother. Being a mother is such a unique experience. And I agree with all that, but let's be honest, when it's in sin, it's pretty tricky, right?
Then if you say something about it, they say, oh, just, it'll be over soon. It goes by so quick.
Fast, you know?
And
it's all those little times when they smile at you that you feel it's all worth it.
Or you don't have a choice now.
And then you got a teenager who hasn't smiled at you for 5 years. Now it doesn't feel very worth it anymore, right? Yeah. Just having a joke.
So we just feel all that now.
Sorry?
So we just go ahead and feel all of that now.
Yeah, a lot of this is driven by the expectation. It's the expectations. So you see, when you have expectations, you set yourself up for certain things to occur. So if the expectations are not met, then anger is naturally going to be the result. And unfortunately, most of you ladies are sold a whole heap of expectations about having children. You're sold it. It's a bill of sale, given to you from little baby when you were given a doll. Yeah? And it's a bill of sale that is there as expectations. And so you're expecting that, like, I'll be more valid, I'll be more worth, I'll have more worth, I'll have more, society will treat me as if I have value, right? And things like that. There's all these expectations. And when they're not fulfilled, anger is going to be the result. So the real problem is deal with some of the anger, go through the anger, let yourself have the anger, but you need to get to what expectations you have and feel how sinful they were. They weren't real. Like, none of these things, like, you're not worth anything more just because you had children. You're not. You're never going to be. They're not your children, right? You can't say that just because you allowed some guy to have sex with you, right, that you did anything other than let some guy have sex with you to have a child. You follow? It wasn't, you didn't design the child, you didn't design his body, you didn't put his genetics together, you didn't, like, God's processes did all that. God's the real parent. Not only the real parent of the soul, but also the real parent of both bodies, really. Because all you did was really just have sex, and all the other things that went on to create this child and all the processes that went on, God designed. You didn't do anything about them. You just allowed them to occur for 9 months, right?
Yeah.
And then they were born. You allowed yourself to give birth and then they were born, right? So you got to stop thinking as women that this is a major part of your worth.
Well, and honestly, can I just say, that's a distraction from a hell of a lot of injustice done towards women over centuries.
Yeah.
And women have decided, well, this is our thing then. You know, this is where we get to.
You see, women
shine.
historically weren't allowed to have their own businesses, weren't allowed to have their own life. They weren't allowed to do their own thing. They weren't to have their own passions. They weren't allowed to do anything that the man told them they weren't allowed to do. But they were allowed to have sex and have children.
And men can't do that. They can't have the children. So it creates this whole big investment now in, well, this is our thing. And we're gonna, you know.
This is what makes us valid in society.
Yeah, this is the thing that we can be good at and only we can do. And it's actually a terrible detriment to ourselves. It's like pulling down our own potential in a way when you attach all of your worth to this one thing that you've done in your life.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it's not a worthy thing to do. It's a very worthy thing to do.
Yeah.
But when you attach your identity to it, then you are participating in harm that's been done to you over centuries, generationally, saying that that's all you can do and that's all you're good at.
Yeah. You're just there for the man, sexual needs, and to have his children.
To forward the line or whatever, you know, the old beliefs.
Yeah.
So is that expectation, that's like an expectation that I have for myself, but
Yes.
do I also have a demand that society give me those things?
That's often how the expectations begin.
Okay.
The demand
So
comes
I can
from society,
manage
and then you feel you have to take them on, so you create expectations for yourself. So now you believe in the same demands that society has for yourself. You think that that's your future life.
But I also see a lot of women get very disappointed because they do think, I will do this and then I will be loved and I will be honoured and I will be accepted.
Respected.
And it doesn't happen, does it?
No.
Women end up tired.
Even their own
and
children don't
unloved
respect
and-
them half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you sacrifice yourself, so now you're, you think that's love, that's like, that's not love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of falsehoods.
Yeah, wrapped up in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of spiritual principles are being broken
Correct.
with
Correct.
the whole.
The whole set of expectations and beliefs around motherhood.
Yeah, so obviously God designed the process of fatherhood and motherhood to be a process of learning for you as an adult, that you learn some of the feelings that He feels for you as His child. Because what you end up doing is you start having some of those same feelings for the children you take care of.
Yes.
And so what it does is it does educate you with about a love, a type of love that's not romantic love, but a love that's caring for somebody you're responsible for, because and protective of someone you're responsible for. And this is how God feels about you, and you start sort of the process of having a child can teach you a lot about how God feels about you. Right? So that's one reason why God designed the process.
Yeah.
Another reason was so that people could come to the world. They need to incarnate in order to be individualized, and so God created the process. But God created the process so you could share in his experience of what it's like to actually feel for these children who come into the world, right? To educate you in a type of love that you would not have been educated in until you have the child, right? So he's educating you. Now, that's not strictly correct, what I just said, of course, because you don't need to have your own child in order to feel that love, right? So but God has sort of designed it so you can experience some forms of love in this manner. Now, aside from that, you're an educator. You're the older brother, older sister. That's your role. Your role is to educate the child, not for the child to like you.
Or even love.
Or even love you
or
in
give
the end.
you things,
Or give you things in the end, or look after you in your old age, or none of that. No, none of that. It's so that you could experience what it feels like to love someone in a more unconditional manner.
And see the benefit of law. You know, you have to create a set of laws in your home, and if they're loving and good, that causes the child to grow spiritually and emotionally in a really healthy way. If you don't have good law, it doesn't go well.
No,
and that's really what God's designed for us, is all these good laws.
Yeah, and he's designed you in such a way that you can almost do some of the things that he's doing with you with a little person, you know. And if you do it in a nice, loving, responsible manner, there's a lot of benefits for the little person and for you that can come about from that. But if you do it in an expectation manner, you're going to be very disappointed.
How do you, like, when, let's say, when you teach something that's false, and when you release your sins about it, you have a real desire to make amends.
Correct.
And to help the damage, a little damage control.
Yeah.
Or at least
to repair the damage.
Repair the damage that you've done.
Correct.
So in the repentance process, that's like huge. You just,
yes.
Yeah, but not to do it out of guilt, but to do it in a way that is in harmony
with God's principles of love.
Yeah, it's a big thing that will motivate you.
Yeah.
And you know what? It'll motivate you not just to do that with your own children, but to do
with
it
everyone.
with parents and children everywhere.
Everybody.
Yes.
Everybody. Good eye.
May I just ask, so most of those emotions are now going to enter the child too, so it's really going to affect the child.
Correct. That's the sad thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the sad thing is that if I don't deal with my expectations before the child is born, and I have them, and then I have a lot of anger and fear and numb out and all these other things, now of course the child is going to feel almost responsible for me feeling those things.
Yes.
So the child's going to go through a lot of things and probably get pretty angry with me as well, as your child is. And unless I get rid of these expectations emotionally and change my behaviour, obviously that will continue till my child's probably an adult, and even after I die, she'll probably still feel the same way. And this is the damage we do not understanding, We sort of have all these expectations, they're not fulfilled. We have all these angry responses to them not being fulfilled. And then unfortunately our child, because they're living with us all this time, is going to feel some of those. And of course they're going to have their own reactions to that, their own feelings about that. Because every time we feel these things, we are withdrawing love from our child.
Yeah.
So they're going to feel the withdrawal of love constantly. Yeah. And then of course that's going to affect their development in love as well. That's why it's so important to deal with your stuff. If you're contemplating being a parent, deal with, be focused on dealing with your stuff. And you don't have to be perfect about it. You need, if you're humble to dealing with your stuff, you'll find that there'll be very positive results at even being an imperfect mother with an imperfect child. As long as you're humble to these feelings, and there'll be very positive results. And the children by the time they're 10, 11 or 12, they'll be quite, well adjusted citizens of society.
Well, I'm thinking, I don't have children, but I'm thinking how my mother could have affected me, and therefore I interact with children who aren't mine, and therefore I could be affecting them too.
Of course you will be,
not to such an extent.
It's not so big, because a lot of times you're not day and night caring for them. But if you were let's say you were a nurse in a hospital, day and night caring for them, then of course they're very young, and you're going to have a fairly big effect on them with these attitudes, you see. So even the very first few days of their life are a very important time for the child, because it's absorbing a lot of emotion during that time from lots of different people. And unless you're dealt with a fair bit of your stuff and have a love for the child, then the child's just going to feel withdrawal of love each time. It's going to be tough for the child to have to deal with that, because remember, it's feeling all these feelings without the intellectual development to prevent them, and without the intellectual development of understanding that you've got a few problems. They don't know you've got a few problems. They don't know that you have these feelings. They don't know any of that. They're just feeling the results of it. Yeah. It's going to be tough.
One of the ways to make reparation, because my kids are all in their 30s now, and all, I certainly can already feel the positive effect of my repentance, because I'm not defensive. I'm like, when they point out to me, I think they also know I'm really sorry, but you talk about reparation, maybe even though I don't want to tell them, they've got to choose to forgive me or not. I have no control over that. I pray for it, that they will do it sooner than later for them, not for me. But maybe working with mothers who are going to have kids and just say, look,
educate them,
educating
it's
them.
a great way to.
I think that might be a nice way to help me feel a little bit better about what the damage I did do.
Well, it's not about helping you feel better.
No,
it's about.
If you do it for that moment, we're going back into sin.
That's right. It's about you recognizing, wow, if I was told a lot of things truthfully about what it's like to be a mother, and if I can bring that same knowledge now that I have to a new mother who's expecting, and I can help that mother connect with a lot of these feelings she's going to have, because there's all these expectations she already has, right? Then I can undo some of the damage that was not only done to me, but also done to the children that come about as a result of the damage done to the mother, So this is the kind of thing you would do in the spirit world if you were, helping people. You'd help mothers deal with these emotions, for example. So while you might not be able to help the children, in the spirit world, if you're there, and many mothers arrive in the spirit world with a lot of quite dark emotions they're not allowed to have on earth regarding having children. You see, most women who have had children in their life on earth have never experienced their true nature or their true personality themselves, their own true nature or their own true personality, because they've spent all of their entire life caring for children, caring for husband, caring for being a role, right? And so they have no idea who they are, no idea the personality and nature that God designed them to have, and no idea that some of them are scientists, and some of them are mathematicians, and some of them are chemists, and some of them are, artists, and some of them are musicians, and they've never had the experience their entire life of even connecting to any of that, because all they imbibed was this sort of idea that my most important job is my family. You follow? And so there's many, many women who pass into the spirit world who feel a huge sense of loss about their loss of life on earth. Because while they were on earth and they got their family and they got their grandkids and they got everybody around them, they're still feeling the same wonderful sensation, the addiction really it is, isn't it? Right. The addiction of, this is my role, this makes me valid. And then as soon as they pass, they've got none, not a child, not a, like no children, no grandchildren, because all of them are still on earth, right? And they've got no way of feeling it, and they start going through feelings of what do I do now? My whole life for 70 or 80 years has been about caring for my family and caring about my grandchildren and caring about my great-grandchildren, and isn't it all wonderful, and everyone's validated me through that process, and everybody's made me feel like I'm worth something through that process, and then when I pass in the spirit world, I got none of it. What am I worth now? And so many women go through this terrible state of sadness and depression actually when they pass, because they feel like they have no worth now, no validity now, no role now. What do they do? And their soul, remember from our previous discussion, is still 2 years old in its development of its nature and personality, because all it's ever done from the age of 2 was be taught that it's going to be a mum.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? And so many women pass with this sort of feeling of like, what does this life, this spirit life, have for me?
Do they stay earthbound?
Oftentimes,
so
yeah.
They're around the grandchildren?
Oftentimes for an entire generation or two.
And then probably influencing
Yep.
people not in a very good way, right?
Influencing the next mums and the next mums.
Wow.
Yep. They often feel, what else can they do?
That's the only way they're going to get their addictions dead.
Sorry?
That would be the only way they could get their addictions dead.
Yeah, not only that, it's the only way they can feel like they have any worth or value. Yeah. And there's no knowledge that, like I said, many of them are, undeveloped scientists and undeveloped, like what they could have achieved on Earth.
Yeah.
And also what they would now be in the spirit world if they had actually connected to their true nature and their true personality. Most women have been taught not to even have one, a personality or a nature.
Is it hard for the celestial angels, the loving angels, to help those kind of souls?
There is, but it's difficult, because how do you convince somebody that their addiction to being a mother wasn't actually a loving decision?
Yeah.
It's very hard. Their whole life is invested in it.
Yeah, but also society, because like with my grandson, if I don't take care of him, then he's in a daycare.
Yeah.
At 6 months old.
Yeah.
Or less, 6 weeks old.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not taking responsibility for what I created.
Well, who created it?
Well, I created I created it.
Just call us on her stuff right away.
You can see? Can you see?
Yeah.
Can you see the feelings?
Yeah.
It's like my creation, my responsibility, it's not God's, it's not God's child, he's my grandson, he's my son, he's my, these are beliefs that we have that are so strong, and we don't realise that every word almost coming out of us tells us that's what our belief is. And they're so strong, and man, if anybody says, you being a mother, you've wasted a lot of your life. Whoa.
Yeah, it's like
blasphemy. It's like blasphemy to whole society, right? So I'm not saying being a mother is a waste of life. I'm saying by being only a mother, you've wasted a lot of your life. Because your role isn't a mother, it's a teacher, for a start. And secondly, that's not your personality in nature. Every person who has a child has a responsibility to be a teacher. Every person. So that's not your personality in nature. That's a separate issue. It's a responsibility that comes with having a child, is to become a teacher, right? Now that's every person. So that's not your specific, amazing personality nature trait that God designed you to have. That's something that every person would need to learn how to do if they decide to have a child. Now, by making that choice, that is the only thing that's going to bring me worth, and you've been taught this, by the way, all of you ladies have been taught this from young age, way before you even had an intellectual development to even think about it. You've been taught that this is the role of a woman, right? So you've been taught that, you believe that with your whole,
It's in that soul brain.
your whole soul believes this. It's like a huge thing. This is why so many women are desperate to have children, and unfortunately, the desperation to have children creates the inability to have children frequently. So now they're desperate for IVF programs and not understanding the amount of damage that does to all these little souls who are all involved in that program. You know, there's terrible damage done, and there's all these miscarriages. 100 million of them a year going on because of this desperation for mothers to be mothers. Sorry?
I'm so sorry for interrupting. Is that what causes a miscarriage?
Yeah.
Is that really
This
strong?
desperation to take on the role of being a mother and to have a projection at the child, that the child now has a role to support the mother in its role. And yes, that's what causes the major cause of miscarriage. Just a single major cause of miscarriage is that, right? Now, 100 million little babies die every year from that cause, just from that addiction, from that strong addiction to have that child. Yeah? And then, of course, you've got all the ones aborted, which are this whole concept that I've got to abort my child rather than give it away.
Yeah.
Because if I give it away, I'm just a terrible person. Right? It's better to kill it before it becomes a child, is the general thinking. Right? And that is another 50 to 80 million children every year. So it's just like, it's the worst problem on the planet. Like, it becomes before any war, like you think of how many people died in the Second World War. I think it was 56 or 60 million people, right? That's like 1/4 of the children who die every year died over a 6-year war. And look how embroiled the whole earth was in that problem. Right? The whole world almost was involved in that problem. And yet, how are we handling this other problem where you've got 180 to 250 million children every year passing, right? How are we handling that problem? We're just ignoring and ignoring all of its causes. Yeah, and men are just as responsible for that as women, by the way. So we're ignoring all of these terrible things. And so when you look at the whole problem, it's like the single biggest problem is how to manage 100 to 200 million children dying every year in the spirit world. Before they've even had a life, before they've even been born, they're dying. Right? It's a huge problem.
Appreciate y'all bringing up this topic and contributing. I felt a lot of emotion, good emotion too. But the last emotion I felt was looking at this after, out of control through, and feeling that's what my mother went through.
That's right.
She was alive. I can see all of that.
Almost every mother who's ever a mother, and you think about our generation, our mothers were young.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like
yes.
my mother, 16. Like barely not a child herself, and she's going through this. Now she'll swear black and blue she didn't have any trouble with it.
This is the conspiracy.
In the last 10 years of her life, she had Alzheimer's.
Yeah, you can understand why.
Connected, but she suffered from, lived to 93. But,
yeah.
And I've never had kids, so I just saw that through my mother.
Yeah, yeah. It's like many of you ladies don't understand that a lot of the things that you feel are suppressed because you're taught you're not allowed to feel them, right? And also a lot of things that are going on are not good. Like you being taught from the age of 2 that being a mother is your main purpose in life. That's not a good thing to teach anybody. It's not, everybody on earth will either be a mother or a father generally. 90% of people on earth is going to be a mother and father, probably. It's not a special, unique, it's a unique role, but it's not special. And that's very different than you finding your personality and your nature and doing that.
It's not your personality.
It's not your personality. It's not your nature. It's by design. It's an instinctual thing almost, not something that is about your soul's development. It's more about, well, it can aid your soul's development, as I said, because it can give you the experience of loving somebody unconditionally, which is a very good experience to have, I must say. But it's still not the thing that it's portrayed to be, right? And this is the trouble, is that on earth we have all of these things that we're taught that things are, and they turn out not being what we expected. And a lot of the anger that exists inside of society is coming from things not being expected but not happening. In your society at the moment, everyone's taught they can be rich. And then there's a lot of people who are not rich. And how do they feel? Well, they feel angry. Because they've been sold this whole concept that everybody should be rich rather than everybody should be equal. And even your whole constitution of your country says that we are all equal, and yet in the same constitution it says that, like, black people are not as equal, really.
Well, it's only men.
Right?
In the Constitution, it's only men that are equal.
Correct. All men are created equal, not women. And so,
White men.
Sorry, all white men.
White.
Yeah,
Sorry,
really is what it
sorry.
is. Yeah. And given the fact that you live in a modern society that's had this constitution for over 300 years, you'd think somebody would come along and change your constitution. But no, they make amendments.
Right.
Instead of actually getting this document and saying, this is unloving to women.
Yeah.
What do we do about that? You know? Let's sort that out. Let's make it part of the constitution of the country. And the reason why that doesn't happen is because the heart of people is, the role of a woman is, and it's the heart of many women are this, by the way, not just men.
Right.
The role of a woman is be a mother, be a family, that's where you get your worth. That's the main source, you know. And you'd think, you know, in a modern society we would no longer have those things, but we haven't dealt with the emotions.
No.
So naturally, you don't deal with the emotions, you still have the same opinions, even though they're ancient.
In fact, most of the condemnation comes from other women.
Yeah.
It's
The
full on.
attack comes from the other women
When you have these issues, yeah.
when I'm releasing some of this.
That's right.
And yeah, it's the women.
Often feel more strongly about it than the men do. And you know, most men looking at the situation of being a mother, they go, yeah, I'm glad I'm not one. You know, a lot of men feel that way. Not very righteously feeling that way, of course. But you can, a lot of men can look at it and go, yeah, that's pretty tough. You know? And of course, if men participated more in the role of being a teacher to their own children, they would understand how tough. Right? Unfortunately, most of them don't understand how tough because of that, because they go off to work half the time, and when they come home, they expect the woman to handle everything that's at the home. So there's attitude issues everywhere that are problematic, and we don't do anything about it.
We don't. And women are competing in their own oppression. They're like, you know, basically saying, I'm better at being oppressed, you know. I'm meeting this beauty standard better than all you other women, and I'm meeting this mother standard better than all you other women. And both of those things are really things we've been sold as things that give us worth. That is not what God sees us.
In the eyes of men, by the way.
You know. And then we get snarky with each other and competitive with each other about how well we can do this thing that is really damaging.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of feelings.
I don't understand why every woman on the planet doesn't have a lot of feelings about it, to be honest. And of course there are going to be things to deal with there about that. Because the sin of society has been perpetrated upon your gender, and many of you have imbibed it as your own sin, and then you're almost in total agreement with it, you know, even though it's a sin.
Push it onto each other as
Yeah.
women.
I just wanted to say you channeled Paloma in Australia.
Yep.
And that recording is online now. It's on YouTube. So she was a woman that was in this addiction.
Yes.
And then perpetuated it down the generations.
Oh, that's right.
Children, that's right. I forgot all about that.
So did I.
Yeah.
It's also South American lady.
South American lady.
Or was he Italian?
Italian. Something.
Yeah. Paloma. The recording it's June this year, and it's on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, so we channeled a spirit who had been in this
Role.
Mothering role, and passed it on, and
Yep.
the pain she had when she passed.
And what she had to go through, feeling about it.
Yeah, that's useful.
Yeah.
Which one was that?
I gave it a title, I think it was Illness, Immorality and Spirit Influence, because there was various different topics that was covered, and you channeled the spirits
At the end, didn't we? Illness, immorality and spirit influence in June this year.
Yeah, I think it was the 15th of June, but
We'd have a recording of it that we'd probably get to when we get home. But, yeah.
On this topic.
Well, no more questions, remember, that was our last.
Yeah, that was our
Sorry.
Sorry?
I didn't hear you, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, no more questions, because we're, what's the time now?
Yeah,
It must be
10 to 5.
10 to 5. It's pretty late. So, just before you get going, we'd like to thank you guys for your participation.
Thank you so
firstly.
much. Yeah.
Thank you, and all of your engagement as well has been really good. We would like to thank those of you who've donated to, and as I said, we're going to be giving some of our donations to the ladies who have made our visit possible here.
And can we take a moment to thank Patty and Jane?
Also, nobody of you have not met Jane's husband yet, but we need to thank him
Yes,
too.
because we are. But Patty and Jane really went to a lot of trouble to think about how they could make the space welcoming for you and comfortable. So
They hired the chairs you're sitting in.
And the portaloos. And Alicia also helped a lot with coordinating with the ladies about your parking and just all these things.
Alicia was brilliant managing the rideshare.
Yes.
You made the ride easy and effortless. People just volunteered.
Yeah.
You know, to coordinate people who didn't have cars.
Yeah.
Smooth.